Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, everybody, welcome. Kathy, if you could do a roll call, please. Oh, yeah. Oh, come on. Thank you, Pat.
Here. Present. Here.
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 Very good, thanks. I see Steve Bernasek's here to open us up.
Dear God, thank you for this beautiful, warm fall day. Trees are starting to change colors. Before you know it, we'll all be hunkered down in winter time. And thank you for our great city, and thank you for the good times we had at the coffin race this Saturday. And thank you for each person that is working on the council here. I just ask that you would give them guidance and wisdom and direction. Bless their lives, bless their leadership. I just ask that you would bless the businesses in town, all that we have here, that you would just bring them prosperity. And again, I thank you for the safety that we've experienced in our city and with our officers on the streets. I ask that as they go on calls that you would give them a hedge of protection around, give them guidance and direction as they handle different things. And same thing with the fire personnel. Keep them safe. Again, bless this meeting and our great city. Amen and amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Steve. All right, my friends, we'll get rolling with our city council agenda. So I'm looking for a motion for a consent agenda tonight.
So moved. Second.
All right, Joanne and Renee, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, so we're looking for approval on regular city council meeting minutes from October 4th, our committee of the whole meeting minutes from October 4th, our payroll period ending October 1st, and the proposal from Chamlin and Associates for $393K for the designing of the 2024 sanitary sewer water main replacement project. So we're looking for a motion for approval. Renee and Christina. And we'll have a roll call, please.
Yes.
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 All right, next we're looking for a motion to approve our bills through October 11.
I'll make that motion.
Darren,
Second.
seconded by the Pats, I guess. I don't know. Pick a Pat. All right, and then any questions? All right, then we're looking for a roll call.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I abstain. The city of Lockport is paying my employer for a storm sewer casting.
Yes.
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 All right, next we're looking for a motion to approve the establishing sale or lease surplus real estate for the city administrator.
I'll make that motion.
JR, Renee. Okay. Any clarifications we want to do? I think we've removed one of the properties, I think.
Yeah, we made that amendment.
Okay. So besides the removal of the one parcel, anybody else have anything else they wanted to discuss? Okay, then we'll do a roll call, please.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, next on the agenda is our facade grant. So before I ask for a motion to approve, we may be approving something different, so maybe I should just ask, what's the latest here?
Yeah, so I'm just going to roll through a couple things so both the general public and all of you kind of know where we stand with this thing. At the H&A meeting last night, the commission approved the black granite regardless of what the backing is, so as long as the face material of it is the black granite for the facade, in addition to an allowance to reduce the panel size from the original panel size down to a 1x1, just out of consideration for cost, to see if there was any variation. The parameters that I kind of gave the H&A last night were So we don't have to continue coming back once a month and just delay this in perpetuity. If we could wrap parameters around what their approval was, that would give us the flexibility to work with the contractors and the fabricators to better align the final product with what is affordable, but also represents the intent of what H&A was looking to do. One of our commissioners, Bob Morris, was meeting with a masonry contractor today that is working on a different project and was willing to meet Todd from the Moose out on site earlier today. The summary of that meeting was that the cost to install the granite in the original size panels will likely be greater than $60,000. However, the contractor was working on a bid to install the 1x1 sizes, which he believes will be lower in cost comparatively. Given their nonprofit nature, the Moose is unable to afford much more than what they had requested in the original grant amount when the material was brick, which is approximately $6,000. And based on conversations with them, their maximum available match funding is approximately $10,000. To accommodate this, we recommend an approval to increase the recommended $20,000 that was in your resolution tonight to an amount up to $50,000, not subject to the 50% matching requirements of the program. And for this approach, I would recommend that the Moose provide a maximum of $10,000 towards the effort in the grant program fund, up to $50,000 of the remainder. To date, the council has approved $48,158.08 of our $150,000 budget. If fully maxed out to the full $50,000, we would have approved $98,158.08, which leaves $51,841.92 for the remaining months of 2023, which in essence we have 3 more meetings. And so we would have to approve additional grants within those 3 meetings, which means somebody would have already had to submit a facade grant proposal in order for it to get approved in 2023 yet. We do have one pending request for $12,450 from an applicant, but there are some code enforcement issues that they are working through to resolve before we will process that grant application. But right now, I don't really have any pending. As it relates to context for all of you, both the amount budgeted that we have for the year plus where we would be with the funding proposal that we have tonight. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the mayor, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. We do have a representative from the Moose here tonight if you have any specific questions for them, but I'd be happy to answer as many as you might.
So the 1x1s is, something that you could still get, obviously. So is it just like stacking 3 1x1s on top of one another and going across that way?
Correct. It's a thinner material because it doesn't have to have the full depth of a full 3 by 3.5 foot panel.
Yeah.
Which, before those panels were about 180 pounds a piece. The thickness was about 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches when they pulled those down. With today's materials, we can probably get it a little bit thinner, but the 1x1s allow them to be significantly thinner than what it was before, and it doesn't require nearly as much structural backup to make sure that they are fixed to the existing wall in a way that is structurally sound for a very, very, very long time.
So you're estimating the total cost of this to be like, how much?
We're hoping to have a bid for the 1x1s by Friday of this week. We, based on both another granite contractor went out to the site before the first H&A meeting to just totally just look at it, not provide an official bid. His number was roughly the same as what the contractor mentioned today as their rough number. So they are putting together a real bid, hopefully to have it by Friday so that we understand the full magnitude of it.
Yeah.
But given where we are in the season and the year, the closer we get to freezing temperatures, the more tenting and heating they would need to do to install it, and or protection for overwinter needs.
Sure.
If we were going to leave the cavity open.
No, I think we understand that. But again, just say one more time what you think he thinks was the final. You were asking us to possibly approve up to so much. What was this number again?
$50,000, up to $50,000. And I did note that, that in your staff report, that was a different project, sorry. I got too many things on the agenda tonight.
Plus 10,000 from,
From the Moose, yes.
so see, oh, okay, I don't understand. Basically, it looks like you're buying marble tile from Marcio, right? I mean, a 1x1 is just a simple tile. I'm having a hard time understanding how that's $60,000 worth of tile. So I do struggle a little bit. I understand that we have it in the budget, like, and it's the gaming money.
But there's also option 2,
Yes, let's use the brick.
just use a brick.
Yeah, I get it.
The brick, though, if it's black, if you look down the street on the other side, the Opera House, they have that black brick. So it's not like it's gonna stick out. It's gonna actually match very nicely.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're kind of rushed on this. What is so bad about leaving it exposed until we can figure out an equitable solution? Because I too feel that spending this money is crazy. I mean, it's not, it's a nice building, and to put the brick up there, I think it'll look nice, especially with the contrast with the brown.
Lance, again, before tonight, we were going to give them X because it was Y, and tonight it's X plus, and because it's Y plus. What are those numbers?
Correct. So the $20,000 was our back of the envelope hope that it would be less than 40,000. And based on the discussion that they had today on site with a masonry contractor and past information that we had gotten for the full-size panels, I'm not so sure that that's going to be the case anymore. And their board has given us some better information for their financial wherewithal of what they can afford. As everybody knows, it's a not-for-profit organization. It's not in their interest to maintain large reserves for maintenance on the building that isn't really anticipated. And so it does impact them in a way that is abnormal from their typical maintenance practices for care for the building. To your question, the cavity right now is open all the way down through the wall. And so if you leave it open and allow ice, water, snow to get in there, there's steel already in there that will then start to rust. And so it needs to be, at a minimum, it needs to be protected through the winter in whatever fashion a mason would recommend that it be protected, but that is the concern. And that is one of the reasons why we want to do it as quickly as we can, for fear that if water or ice would get down into that cavity, it becomes a larger issue than what we already have.
Well, I mean, so here, he's right. I feel, and everybody else put their opinion out there, is like, I'm a big supporter of H&A. I think what they do is good, it's necessary, it helps maintain the integrity of our town. And as last meeting, I spoke in support of this. But at the same time, I try to be pragmatic, and at $60,000, it's just like, okay. There's just some things that I don't think are worth that effort. And I say this to people all the time when they talk about H&A. I said, look, it's not like they make you put recovered wood from the HMS Bounty in the, it's like we try to be pragmatic, and I'm feeling like this is crossing that line. I do feel like I'm a little more, just let them put the brick up for crying out loud, and we'll be done with it. As Christina pointed out, the Opera House has, that siding on there now, and they've got windows that are tinted, which of course wasn't, but at the same time, those windows are nice because they went through the trouble of arching it and putting a cornice, so there's a compromise that they make. I understand that we didn't rebuild the windows exactly the way they were, but I think that's a pragmatic step. And quite frankly, I think with the way the price is going, I could settle with the brick myself. But that's my thoughts, so.
I have a thought, quick question. So a lot of the facade grant money it is derived from some of the gaming, correct?
It is all.
And the Moose is probably a pretty big contributor of that gaming money. I like the marble. I think it's a little classier look. and it looks a little more like, that the era that the building was built in. So if it's gonna be 40,000 for the brick or 60,000 for the marble, that it is marble, and I think it looks very nice. I'm all for the marble, and again, they're contributors of the,
6,000 for the brick.
oh, it's only 6,000.
It would be a $6,000 match, total of
Gotcha.
$12,092 or something like that.
Well, I just think it's ridiculous that my comments a couple weeks ago is, black brick was made in 1954. And had they chosen to use black brick in 1954 or 51, whenever the building was built, then they could have put it back up. But to then go ahead and make a compromise from the 186-pound marble slabs down to, well, we'll take 1 foot by 1 foot. Well, wait a minute, we're now compromising on something that wasn't up there before, which was the big ones. I was for the brick 2 weeks ago. I'm for the brick today.
Anybody else have an opinion? Because we either have to modify what we're approving one way or another, so.
I'll just add, I recently have a project going on in my office, concrete work, and because it needs to be done right away, I had 2 respectable outfits give me 2 bids. I had a $40,000 bid, and I had an $8,000 bid. So I really, it's like, if you put this rush on people to get something done, the price of the job is going to go, and I don't think they're trying to stick it to the moose in any way, but I really feel that's probably excessive. So I would think, I'm for going with brick as well.
I think if we approve $50,000, we'll be the ones getting it stuck to. I mean, you're throwing a budget out there of like, oh, Moose can afford 10, we can afford 50, let's make sure it's, right under 60.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, depending on the
We've
contractor.
seen that in the past, so yes, that is a problem.
I agree. To
Rick.
Christina's point, when we went and looked at the Opera House, looking at the back, I mean, it was aesthetically pleasing. And here you've got a building, you're doing about face, and look at this one. Honestly, I don't think many people would see the difference between, it's like Ricardo Montalban, it's Corinthian leather. It's really pleather, but it looks like leather, right? So, and you said the number went from 20, which we were going to give them, now we're giving them 50. And now you're saying we're coming to the end of the year, we'll have all these funds left over, so let's just give them away. You made a point about a building owner not putting funds away for maintenance of his building. I think that's a fail on the building owner. I mean, when you're a homeowner, you put stuff away for a rainy day in case something happens, right? And granted, this is free money, but still, it just sets a precedence, I think, in terms of what the intent of it was, so.
Well, as a nonprofit, I don't know how much they're allowed to keep in reserves.
So what do you think, Pat? Are you partial to brick, or what do you?
I'm partial to the brick.
I would say from a process standpoint, in order to change that recommendation, the Moose would need to make an official appeal of the Heritage and Architecture Commission decision. And so we can certainly have that set up for the next meeting, but kind of knowing where everybody is, we can kind of get everything, they can get everything lined up as far as installation and getting the material on site and things like that. So, but that is the official process that we do need to follow in order to make sure that we follow our code. So I will certainly have them make that request in writing, and I'll bring it before everybody on November 1st.
Okay, and
So,
then
yeah,
actually.
I would, if I could interject, I would recommend that this item be continued to the November 1st City Council meeting, and that will allow the applicant to make the process, the official process of filing an appeal, and it doesn't have to be a formal appeal, just in writing that, due to hardship or, these 3 factors, we're requesting a modification of the determination made by the Historic and Architectural Commission, and here are the reasons why. And that will be set before the City Council at the same time. It doesn't have to go to the Committee of the Whole, and therefore they will be, lined together, and the City Council could make that determination on the material, and then, approval of the grant amount.
Okay. All right, so looking for a continuance on to the
I'll make the
November 1st.
motion to continue this item to the November 1st meeting.
Second.
All right, all in favor of that?
Aye.
All right, very good. And I would still work on the marble quote. It's like Jonathan said, maybe when they know that we're not willing to pay that kind of money, maybe magically the quote won't be so high. So let's find out. Okay, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Sure. All right, that's everything for city council. So I do have an open comment floor card. So Nancy Hagenberry, you want to come up and speak your piece? We don't actually have this on the agenda, so I'm going to put it under open comments, which is now, if you want to talk. Okay.
Hi, my name is Nancy Hockenberry. I'm a 27-year resident of Lockport and Homer Township. During this 27 years, I have paid taxes to both entities despite receiving virtually no services from Homer Township. I am here tonight asking that the city of Lockport follow Homer Glen and begin to explore dissolving township government. Thank you.
Okay. I think most of us are aware that the village of Homer Glen was going to put a referendum on there, or the ballot, about like, hey, should we explore getting rid of the township? I don't have a personal problem doing that. I know that when Darren and I have discussed a little bit, Darren's like, I'm not sure they can do that, or if,
I would certainly want our attorneys, maybe not tonight, but definitely in a couple weeks, her opinion of what we can do versus what the public can ask.
I will,
yeah, like I
Put
wonder
that
if it
opinion
really
in the
needs to
opinion.
be something from, like Nancy
Yep.
files that petition as opposed to the city council doing it.
actually, you could do one way. The city council does have the authority to put a, item on the referendum, but there's deadlines involved. The actual, voters can do that also, and again, that's deadlines involved. So I will,
If you can give us
Yeah,
some
I will
insight
do
then
a
about like what
consi-
the
yep,
deadlines
mhm.
are.
Yes,
Right?
I will do
And
that.
that would be helpful. And then, yeah, I think it's a fine question. I mean, Illinois has more layers of government than any other state in the union, and if in fact they shrink because they're pulled out of Homer Glen, and I know that Supervisor Balich has been divesting himself of certain things, like getting rid of parks and getting rid of some of the obligations, so it seems like it's in line with something they've envisioned in the past, so I'm open to that, but why don't you give us some insight?
Yes.
And keep us posted.
Will do.
All right, thank you, Sonny. All right, so if there's nothing else, looking for a motion to adjourn. All right, Renee and Joanne, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, and we'll just wait for a roll call to open up our committee of the whole.
Okay, I'm ready if you are.
All right, yeah, please.
All right, let's do it. Sheehan.
Here.
Pugh.
Present?
McDonald.
Here.
Galogly.
Here.
Bergbauer.
Here.
Deskin.
Here.
Bartleson. Here. Saban. We have a quorum.
All right, Lance, you want to take this, talk to us a little bit about the Commerce Street parking lot?
I will certainly do that. I'm going to put that up there for right now. So what you will have, our applicant, Dan Kleister, who is with Fuller Investments, one of their principals and partial owners, along with his other family members, approached us, as you all know, in April about a option to buy the Commerce Street parking lot at 923 through 929 State Street, with the proposal to build a three-story building. What I've asked Dan to do tonight is to at least give you all a preview for what that building could look like. They are pretty far down the road. They've engaged a contractor, they've engaged an architect, they've engaged a civil engineer to really hone in on all the details of the project. They have cost opinions from their contractor based on all the material prices, so all the things that you see for bids and all that kind of stuff. They have completed all of that work. He is also going to go through some of the financial components of it. Obviously, given an incentive agreement that would come with this, we want to make sure that you are aware of all the debt financing and how all of that works and why it's important, and how it relates to the construction costs that has increased from what was originally an estimated based on a square footage number to an actual bid. So when we talk about bids for granite and other things, these are the inflationary pressures that we have on construction and financing costs. So Dan's going to come up here in a little bit, but I want to talk just briefly about the process that this project will go under. For many of you who were here when we approved the zoning code 2 years ago in 3 years ago now, in 2020, we initiated what was called the Conventional Site Plan Review Committee. And that was for projects that did not require any variances, it did not require any ordinances, it did not require any special use permits or things like that, and was basically built to code. And that kept it away from the political process and kept all of you protected from requesting things that otherwise wouldn't be allowed from a general zoning process. The review committee is made up of all of the staff members, as well as a representative of the city council, who is our liaison, or my liaison, which is Darren, as well as a plan and zoning commission member. They participate on that. They will go through all the normal final development plans that we require of every developer. So there's all the level of detail, all the level of reviews that we give it from a staff level, both engineering as well as planning and zoning. And ultimately come to the Conventional Site Plan Review Committee for a decision on that project. And once the committee has approved it or denied it, it is then a project that can move forward to a building permit process. So in essence, it helps to speed projects up for those that don't have any issues that require ordinance authority or resolution authority. And so that will be the process that the project will go under, but we want to make sure that all of you are informed about every aspect of the project. And so whether it's in my weekly emails to all of you, or whether it is in a special email, you will all receive updates on many of the projects, just like I send you out about now, but in particular this one as we go through the process. You might think it's a difficult project, but in reality, from our standpoint, planning and zoning and engineering, it's a relatively simple project. All the pipes are there. Basically, it takes 2 feet to connect the pipe to the building. We allow 0 lot lines in the downtown, so that's where it's built out to. We allow a certain height in the downtown. That's where it fits within the envelope. We require certain uses in the downtown on the first floor and the upper floors, and that's what we have with this project. So in essence, there's really nothing to discuss at a council or plan and zoning commission level based on your purview. Heritage and Architecture, though, will review the exterior of the building to make sure that it conforms with all the standards that we subscribe to as a part of our ordinances and that. So I wanted to introduce all of that to you so that you had a sense for what the process for this would be. But the subject before you tonight is the redevelopment or the development agreement, where the applicant is requesting some additional funds related to their original option to purchase as it relates to the construction costs and the percentages related to that. Dan's going to go into that in a little bit more detail, so I will turn it over to him, and he can walk us through.
It's just this. Thank you, Lance, for the intro. Thank you, committee. As Lance said, Dan Klister here with 4 to kind of, in a sense, preview or update you on the State Street project. As Lance mentioned, it will be about a 38,000 square foot building that will encompass in total, I guess, 4 floors, but beyond a first floor parking structure, 3 floors of actual occupancy. When we first got into the project, we put together kind of a rough budget and discussed incentives with Lance. And as he mentioned, since then, we've been able to put a team together that has kind of dialed in certain aspects of the project and get us closer to where I think we ultimately will be. And so again, that is why I guess I am here tonight, to kind of highlight some of the updates or differences from where we initially were. The project plan and revenue assumptions, and I will say from our standpoint as a developer, what the market is seeing in general, are likely aggressive. We still feel comfortable with our assumptions, and believe they are achievable and ultimately are necessary for this project to be successful. So as you can kind of see in the breakdown, it would be a 30-unit building, or 30 rental resident units, majority of which will be smaller one-bedroom units. We'll have a few 1.5 bed or 1 bed plus den 1 bath units and a couple 2 bed 1 bath units. We would charge, again, these are all kind of at a high level for operating, a little bit extra per month for pet rent, parking, and there would be options for storage. In addition to the residential units, there would be about 1,800 square feet of retail that would face State Street off the first floor. And at this point, again, in our budget, we are performing about $20 a square foot. Timing, again, I think as Lance mentioned, there's still plenty of work ahead from an approval process. But at this point, with extensions to the existing contract, we would project a closing sometime early next year with a construction start date of April and a completion date of sometime in August of 2025. This would just be an overview of the site. This is a very preliminary or high-level rendering that we had put together just to kind of envision what it could be. Again, we know there will be a process with the Heritage and Architecture Commission to really kind of gather input and figure out what makes most sense for the building and ultimately the streetscape there in this location for the city. This is the parking level, which would be accessed off Commerce Street. There are 21 total stalls. As I mentioned, there'd be some optional storage and then building support. We would have secured entry off of Commerce Street via a fob and or garage clicker for residents that wanted to enter the rear corridor or garage. 2 staircases and an elevator would provide access to the upper floors. This would be that first floor that you would access off State Street, again showing the retail component that would be front-facing with a small residential lobby and access for the tenants there off of State Street. This and then the upper floors would be comprised again of mostly smaller 1-bedroom units and a few, a little bit larger 1 bed plus den and 2 bed units. So as I mentioned, we have been able to, along with our team, really go out and try to figure out exactly, what this would cost. And after digging into more, detailed site specifics or existing conditions there at the property, along with the structure itself, and then ultimately what would be required from a design standpoint, we have received a budget of a little over $8.1 million. The requested incentive updated amount would be $2 million, and as shown, paid out over the first 6 years of the project. The below tries to explain, again, at a basic level, essentially the economics of the deal. And so the incentive is ultimately there for us to provide a short runway to get this project up and out of the ground, where you can see in year 7, where it starts to begin, or the red highlighted portion, where it begins on the lower numbers to dip below 1. That is the ultimate area of concern, or why we are here requesting that increased incentive amount. So what would happen is we would be collecting incentive, and most likely our financial institution or lender would require us to either pay down debt ahead of time, or at least keep some amount in escrow to be able to hit, I guess, what would be considered in the industry a healthy debt service coverage minimum. Basically saying we are bringing in enough money to cover, our debt payment and keep this project financially feasible through the term of the deal. I think that was the last one, so if there are, any questions?
I'll go over one thing related to the request, and it's really tied to the next item as well. But one of the things that we had talked about in April when this came up before, and a number of you weren't on the council at that point, so I do want to explain how this works from the city's standpoint, is when we run our calculations based on that construction price amount, we factor that into the equalized assessed value of what the property will be valued at by the tax assessor once the project is occupied and in. When we do those calculations based on our TIF numbers that we have in the city, meaning any of that increment, because it currently is valued at 0, comes to the city as it relates to the property tax, which in total, based on that construction value, is $250,000 annually. So that would be their tax bill. 28% based on our TIF agreement goes to the other districts. That was the way that they approved it back in 2008. We retain 72% of those funds. When we run those numbers against the incentive that's being requested, what we come out with is if we do half of that incentive via the TIF and the other half via the gaming funds, where we end up with, at the end of our TIF, basically in 2032, which is when our TIF expires, we will have generated a net revenue pickup of $260,000, 867 cents plus or minus. And so, in essence, what I want to communicate to you is the project is, to a degree, self-funding their incentive. So it's the amount that we currently get from the TIF, irregardless of other development or anything like that, remains the same. That doesn't decrease, that doesn't go away because of this incentive. This project is self-funding its own TIF incentive. The gaming piece obviously is separate from that, and that would be a part of our gaming fund, which is why we always felt like it was a good thing to be able to pull from, because again, it's not impacting our capital plan, it's not impacting our operations or anything like that. It allows, like I said, the TIF to self-fund a portion of the incentive and the gaming fund to fund the other half. So from a budget standpoint, it doesn't really change our budget amounts very much outside of allocating those funds in our TIF fund to be able to pay for that. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody was clear on where the funds were coming from and how they get applied relating to the tax that's generated. As an example, the 1016 building that was recently constructed now has an equalized assessed value for this year of roughly $300,000, which, as you know, you multiply that by 3 and the value of the building is $900,000. So those funds will also be going into the TIF starting next year when that tax bill is paid. So just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that. If you have any questions about the project, Dan's obviously here. If you have any questions related to process or things like that, I'm here, and then we can talk about the actual agreement on the next item.
I do have one question about the TIF. So it assumes that the building is going to be reassessed in a timely fashion. So that is one of the struggles we've had with like timing of assessment. So in order for this to work the way you think it's gonna work, it would have to be assessed at one point in the project, like the day,
When occupancy is given. So as the example that I gave you, the 1016 building, we turned those permits in when they received occupancy in March of this year. The assessor assessed it, which is where the EAV for a partial year came up as $300,000. So she did assess it immediately as it came onto the tax rolls, and that's actually the benefit of a new building
Yeah.
as opposed to a renovation.
Okay.
So that's always where the challenge comes in, is with a renovation, they have to evaluate what the permit value was and assess it based on all those kinds of things. A new building is nothing's there
Yeah.
to something's there, and so it automatically generates that assessment.
Okay, that's good, I understand, because I know we've had some struggles with reading,
Yes,
so.
absolutely.
My question is, does the project only work with the small amount of retail? I noticed in that your one first floor drawing seems to have just a small part of retail, and then about another 8 or 10 rental units just on the first floor. Is the option of somebody wanting the whole first floor for commercial retail, I mean, an option, or is it not?
Unfortunately, on our end, no. Financially, it's not feasible. So for every unit that we would lose on the residential side, that would mean you'd have to replace it with retail charging, give or take, $35 a square foot. So again, I think back to our assumptions, we're already pretty aggressive at $20 a foot, thinking we'll likely end up closer to 15, 18. We're looking at almost doubling that number if we get rid of any residential units.
You actually make less on the commercial than you do on the residential, as far as from a revenue standpoint.
I just think about it, but people are going to look and go, oh, look at more apartments, instead of saying, this is a business that we brought to our company, or to our town.
Yeah, kind of the way that I've explained it to others is that 1,800 square feet, even though it looks small relative to the overall plan size, it's actually the same as or larger than the vast majority of our downtown buildings that currently exist. And the reason for that is this is one of the very few buildings that goes all the way back on its lot. If you look at most of our downtown buildings, either go halfway back, some don't even go halfway back, some go 3/4 of the way back. This is really one of the few that would go all the way back, which is what generates that amount of space in the back of the building to allow for those apartments to be on that first floor. For a retailer to fill that entire first floor would be nearly impossible unless you have a giant franchisee. I think as Dan had mentioned, I forget what the first floor plate is, but we're looking at 9,500 square feet of retail, which would be 3 times the size of the Opera House first floor as a comparison, so that you have a sense for scale.
I have a question, and it's going to be for Sonny, and I know you don't know the answer now, okay? I just looked up to see what the TIF base value for this building is, $95,370. The city of Lockport bought the property for $80,000 back in 2013, so those numbers are kind of out of whack. So the question is, in regards to the other taxing bodies, the 28%, is it possible, I don't know if it is or not, is it possible to go back to these people and say, look, we have an opportunity to go ahead and, if you all go ahead and forego your 28%, of which City of Lockport gets a portion of the 28%, in exchange for all the new revenue we've given you over the past 10 years, I don't know if it can be done.
You would have to amend the TIF agreement. That would require opening it up, putting it back to public hearing, having actually the joint board would have to approve that also.
Yeah.
So it's part of the underlying original TIF.
Yeah, granted, and so if it's, what was your number, 200, and what was the tax dollars?
At $250,000 a year, plus or minus, and at the end of the TIF, we're at 258, 867.
So it's 250 minus 95, 3, okay, times 28%, whatever that number is.
That 250 includes the original EAV starting value.
It's 250 straight.
Okay.
That's the city's portion, right? Is that what you're talking about, the city's portion?
No, that was the original purchase.
72%
Oh.
of 250.
So when the EAV was set in 2008, when the TIF district started, so in essence, when a TIF district starts, it freezes all the EAVs at whatever they're valued at that moment. Everything above that value is what becomes the TIF increment. So when we talk about tax increment financing, that increment is what then comes in to the city, and we disperse 28% of that to the adjoining agencies that are part of our tax bill, and then we retain the 72% of that value. And so we did include the base assessed value back in 2018 or 2008 when we evaluated that.
I would like to go ahead and just ask the other taxi bodies if for this one property for the next 9 years, if they would forego their extra $1,200 a year, or whatever it would be. So we could go ahead and use that TIF, that full 28% to add to this. Because in the long run, come 2033, they're gonna be getting their full amount anyway for the next 150 years. So,
I mean, it's worth asking. I mean, if all they could do is say no. If they say yes, then there's a process.
Yeah.
It's a little cumbersome, but it's possible.
we just look into it. Thanks.
I have a question not related to numbers, is you have 24 rental units that are the one bedroom. What demographically, what does that tenant look like? Because it just seems like a huge number of one-bedroom rentals. Who's that customer going to be?
Sure, and maybe relative to the downtown currently, that seems large, but given the area and all the comparables that we've dug into, it's a fraction of the potential renters in the area, so it could be a number of different people, you know, a young person that is, you know, wanting to get to the area and live in their first home, an elderly couple, a recent divorcee. There's a number of different types of people that are looking for one bedrooms, and we see this again through comparables in the area here, and frankly everywhere else that we've built apartments at this point. So.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
You got the construction date finishing, August, was it August 1st, 2025?
Give or take, yeah.
And liquidated damages start is January 1st, 2026?
2026. Well, no, actually, yes.
Yeah, in the document here. What's the date after which, like, a property won't go, or won't show up on the tax rolls for the next year? I mean,
August.
Is it August? Okay, so do we need this to be done by August 1st?
We still have, we have 1 year of flex.
Yeah.
Before the TIF expires. So we have, by the time it's occupied in 2026, we still have 1 year left on that with the increment that would be generated to be able to offset the incentive.
Cool, thanks.
Any other questions? All right, so lay out how you want to handle this, Lance. And we have this kind of under the mayor's report at the moment.
Yeah, this
Yep.
piece is just information.
Yep.
And to be able to answer questions about the project and the process. The next agenda item is the actual agreement itself.
Okay. All right.
So item CD1, I don't, if you want me to go, it actually basically puts pen to paper the outline of the agreement that Lance gave in a brief outline. This actually sets the legal authority for the city council to approve this type of economic incentive. Number one, the property's in a TIF district. Two, the developer has shown that it is capable of, completing the work. And three, that the statutory, authority allows the city council to transfer this property owned by the city to the developer with the economic incentive. And as mentioned by Councilmember Alderman Pugh, that there are protections for the city. There's liquidated damages that starts January 1, 2026. If the project is not completed, there's liquidated damages of $10,000 per month, capped at $250,000. This is being introduced, so if the consensus of the city council is to move up that liquidated damages deadline date, and if the developer is willing to agree to that, we can certainly do that. The other thing is that the economic incentive starts January 15th after the issuance of the first certificate of occupancy. I'm sure that the developer's incentive to complete the project is, very dire for them, because they want their money. So the sooner that they complete the project, the faster that they get the economic incentive. So that's the incentive that the agreement outlines. And it is, this agreement is very similar to other agreements like Embers, when the city purchased that property for six-figure and gave it to the current owners of Embers to rehab the burnt-out building, and now is flourishing, a very successful restaurant and a speakeasy upstairs. So this is not out of the ordinary, very similar to other economic incentives that the city has approved, and it will, again, give the ability for the developer to make a downtown hole in Commerce Street, a parking lot, and put it back on the tax roll. So if there's any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them, and if there's any changes that the consensus of the city council would direct me to negotiate or redraft the agreement, I can certainly do that.
I'd like to see local contractors at least mentioned in the document. It doesn't have to be 100%. I know that's not always possible. But if we could find a way to include local contractors in the project, is that?
I think one way we've asked that in the past is that, like, look, here's our local contractors. Please give them a shot, and if their bids
Yeah.
are outrageous, then that's
Yeah.
business. But we just ask that you reach out to them.
Absolutely, yeah. I
Yeah.
think we would always try to do that, but I can't commit to anything in a legal.
Yeah,
document,
guaranteeing it.
so-
I get it.
Absolutely.
Just to go ahead and give a little past information, that was a requirement when Embers was built. And there was a day, it was like 6 weeks into the rehab, there was like 50 people working there, and 42 of them were from Lockport and Crest Hill. All union, non-union, and it was great. And we got our investment back in the wages paid to the contractors, literally in 6 weeks. So,
I mean, ultimately, this is what the TIF is for. It's for doing things like this, to redevelop properties that just are really hard to do otherwise. Yeah.
I could put a provision that the developers encouraged to use local contractors.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, just that you allowed them to bid, or that you reached out to them to bid, that would satisfy my,
And I'd like to clarify that
Need.
we will look into those TIF members, but Lisa, Lance, and I have run the numbers, and what we're presenting today does work, and it does pay for itself. But if we can negotiate a better deal with all of those TIF members, we will do that, and we will be able to pay ourselves back even faster. But I would suggest that we don't wait 4 months of
Yeah,
meetings
because
and
if it's-
conversations to hold him up.
if it's $60,000.
Yeah, it's not much, but
$60,000, and so Kelvin Grove is at, 3.5%. It's not as, so they're looking at, 10 grand or 11 grand.
I'll bring you to the sales pitch meeting.
It'd be $70,000 is the 28%.
That was pretty good.
Pretty
That's
close,
pretty
pretty
good in
close,
my
but-
head.
Yeah, right.
But I didn't want to hold up the package.
No, I think we need to move forward with it as presented, and if
I
we
love
can.
this. Thank you for coming to Lockport.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think we're all excited about seeing the project, and I think it's great, so thank you for, yes. And, I know that just some of my requests about, like, some cornices and things are there, thank you for that, and I'm sure H&A will have some comments, but just making sure we didn't plop down the Holiday Inn Express in the middle of our city, right? It's like having some architectural elements that help make it blend, I think is.
Absolutely. Yeah, it wouldn't be a good reflection of us either, so thank all of you.
Okay. All right, so why don't we put it down as an action item, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, thank you, everyone. Okay, CD2, 148 unit townhome development north of 151st.
Thank you, Mayor. This is related to Resolution 23095. Mike Stockwell, on behalf of Lennar Home Builders, has submitted an application for a concept plan for a 148-unit townhome development named Oak Valley. Street layout follows the approved layout from 2022 that was developed by Pulte and approved through a preliminary plan process. Property is impressed currently with a special use for a residential plan development and is zoned R2 single family, which allows for townhomes. Upon approval of the concept plan, the special use permit for a PD will need to be replaced with a new special use permit as requested by the applicant. The site plan, here's the location of the site. 355 is the wider roadway on the right-hand side of the image. 151st Street is along the southern boundary of the property. Prologis, as you can probably tell, is north of it, and Creekside Estates is to the west. Here's the site plan. Site plan illustrates 39 attached single-family townhome buildings. There are 8 3-unit and 31 4-unit buildings for the total of 148 units. Open space has been provided at the north of the development around the stormwater basins, including bike paths and connections throughout. All units will have 2-car garages with a separate driveway. 25-foot front yard building setback will be provided for each unit. Lot area will be approximately 6,000 to 7,500 square feet. All of those are meet our zoning code requirements. There are no real requests for variations by the applicant through this process, but the special use permit for a planned development is what requires the ordinance from all of you and the resolution for final development plans. Here are some images of the architecture. We are continue to work. We always work through architecture all the way through final development plan with our applicants to refine these. This is slightly different from what we had originally been shown. We've been starting to work with them on some stylistic elements in the plan. Here's the other item, or the other design style that you see on there. Here is a general utility plan. We have been working quite intensely with the applicant on a number of different utility items related to both off-site and off-site issues. Not that this was overly difficult, but there were a lot of elements that needed to be considered as it related to our water tower to the east, access to that water tower and the pump station, some piping along 151st Street that exists, connections over to, in the northwest corner, over to Creekside Estates, the park expansion with the Lockport Township Park District for an existing park that would then be over doubled in size for what this development would provide. With that, the Plan and Zoning Commission met on at our last meeting in October. They voted 7-0 to recommend approval of the townhome development, subject to the following conditions. I won't read through all of these because they're all mostly standard in what we have. All the engineering comments have been resolved. All of the plan and zoning comments have been resolved. And again, this is a concept plan. It's valid for 1 year after the date of approval. My understanding is that they plan to move forward into final development plans pretty much as quickly as they possibly can. So I would anticipate that this would come back to this body probably in February or March as a final development plan, if approved tonight.
All right, any questions, thoughts, concerns?
Layout of the homes. You mean the site plan? So this is the original. Fortunately, this property is not that large, and there's basically about 2 ways that you can lay it out. There's this way, and then there's a removal of a little stub over by the fire station. So just in order to get all the size lots that we require as a part of our zoning code, this is primarily the only way to do it, and the retention is all downhill towards the creek, so that's where the detention needs to be. So by the time you factor in all those givens, it's pretty much the layout that's required.
There's one house that's in the lower left-hand corner, that's kind of straight.
Mm-hmm.
But yet on the other side, you kind of have one that kind of offsets the street. In looking at that house, I noticed in Clover Ridge, they've got one house that's kind of like that, where the driveway is like in an odd spot, and it's a corner one. And I thought, why couldn't they just have slid it a little bit so that when I'm driving in my driveway, I don't look like I'm driving into their front room?
Mm-hmm.
So that was one thing I thought was kind of odd.
Right.
I see kind of the same thing here.
Yeah, it's not quite as extreme as the one in Clover Ridge, because that one is pretty extreme as far as its proximity of the driveway to the adjacent house. I know which one you're talking about. But again, as a concept plan, we think it in general works out, and we'll continue to work with them on the layout.
Lance, on the elevations that you showed us, that's been updated since the last time we
Correct.
talked about it, and it may get updated further?
This is probably closer to the final.
Okay.
They have actually engaged a different architectural firm from what they had the first time.
Okay.
And we've been working with them very closely. Probably the remaining items that came up at the Plan and Zoning Commission meeting were some treatments on the backside of the home, specifically along 151st Street. So as you're driving along 151st Street, there is some variation that occurs, whether it's materiality or actual some bump out or something like that. That is something the Plan Commission asked that we continue to work with them on.
Okay. Just some background for some of you guys that weren't here for a while. This property was once upon a time zoned for industry. It was an industrial property. They had rights to do an industrial building. But when Prologis was looking at coming in, we asked them if they could take the hit on the property value, and turn it into residential. It was south of the creek. It was on 151st Street. It would help keep access from, any kind of industrial business being able to access it on 151st Street. And it was immediately adjacent to current residential. So they agreed to do that. So that's how this became residential from formerly being industrial. Okay, just some background.
Are the streets public or private inside that?
Public.
Public? Okay.
Public. They'll all be public, just like Creekside Estates is, so they'll connect publicly.
And you mentioned this to me, but for the council, what's their estimated pricing for these units?
Good evening, Mike Stockwell with Lennar. As of right now, we're anticipating high threes, low fours for this product. All 3-bedroom, 2-bath.
Okay. All right. All right, well, if there's nothing else, then we'll put it on for an action item. And is that what you guys are looking for?
Do you want act?
I mean, if it can be
It could be
consent, that's perfectly fine with us. There's no special vote that's required.
Okay, are you guys good with the
Meeting.
consent? Yes. All right, then consent it is. All right, thank you, I appreciate the, the presentation. All right, next thing is a special use permit for the PUD for Prime Business Park.
Thank you, Mayor. This is related to Ordinance 23032 and Resolution 23096. The applicant, R&T Property Limited, on behalf of J&A Sales, is seeking approval for the construction of a new 30,000 square foot industrial building. The request includes a special use permit for planned development, preliminary and final development plan review in one step, and a final plat for a re-subdivision for lots 19 and 20 of Prime Business Park. On your screen, you see the general location of the property. For reference, the Summit Ice Arena will be directly across the street from this, a retention pond to the south, a retention pond to the north, and the ComEd substation to the west. The applicant has outgrown their existing location in Lamont, where they manufacture gasket products, which is classified as limited manufacturing in our zoning code. As a condition of this district, which is all O2, only two loading berths are permitted, and based on the final development plans that have been submitted, there are a total of 4 loading berths, one being for garbage removal and the other for a drive-in door for deliveries. Having the additional loading berths is what triggers the special use permit for a planned development. The applicant has agreed to enter into a license agreement with the city, allowing them to use the Salem Lane Stub Road as an integral part of their operation for parking and loading. Salem Drive is currently a dead-end street that dead ends into the ComEd substation, so there are no uses that will be to the west of it in the future. It is a road that was designed as a 3-lane road with no cars on it. And so we thought, in a way to try and better utilize that street, we could use a license agreement process to allow them to construct their parking to better utilize the full width of the road on that street, allowing them more green space on the property itself and not such a wide road out in front. Salem Drive, after this is constructed, will primarily serve the building itself. There is relatively light traffic that goes to the ComEd substation, typically only when they are doing an improvement at the substation. That's the real only time that we see those kinds of things happening. The site plan illustrates the 30,000 square foot building as shown on your screen. Parking is to the east for on-site parking, and then the parking for Salem Drive is to the south within that current curb alignment. The loading that you can see on the trucks is to the left, and then some additional parking for employees that would be further to the west on that plan. The item was let me go through the architecture component of it as well. So on your screen, what you have here are some images of what the project could look like. Let me see. We do have a perspective, but I didn't put it in the show, so my apologies. There will be some architectural lighting that is at the main entrance. It is full glass at the entrance as well. There is basically architectural metal panel that defines the entrance that extends out from the face. I think it will be one of our nicer looking industrial buildings that we have in the city. It's a material that we haven't seen used within any of our industrial buildings, and I'm pleased with the way that it's turned out. They do have an outdoor seating patio out in front of it for their employees to be able to have lunch at. They have a trellis that goes over that piece of it, a canopy that comes off the front of the building that you see kind of in that thick black line by the entrance there. Landscape plan meets all of our code requirements and exceeds them in many ways. Utility plan shows all the different connections for our utilities themselves. And by a vote of 7-0, the Plan and Zoning Commission adopted staff's findings of fact and recommends approval of the special use permit for a planned development for a limited manufacturing development. And then for the resolution piece of that, by a vote of 7-0, the Plan and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the preliminary and final development plan review and final plat or re-subdivision for the limited manufacturing development to include a 30,000 square foot building. With that, I'll take any questions. The applicant is in the audience tonight, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have for them.
So are the J&A people here or the builders?
J&A.
Oh, yeah.
They're all one and the same.
Right,
It's a
okay, gotcha.
corporation.
Come on up, man, and ask some questions. No, this guy.
My name is Tim Schlosser. I'm the T in R&T Property Investments. Our family's company is J&A Sales. We are pretty much Chicagoland's premier gasket manufacturer. Anything with a steam stack, our gaskets are in there. Grandpa started this in his garage, 1980. We're on our 43rd year. We're third generation. Fourth generation sitting over there. Overall, we tried to make this building a comfortable building that our family would be happy to go to for the next 25 years, with the landscaping and the patio and how it looks. And we're fortunately growing, so we're hoping to double our current employee count, which just hired our 21st employee. So yeah, that's our goal for this building.
That's great. So we like people who make stuff, so that's great. Do you guys just basically bring in big sheets of gasket material and just a bunch of die cutters? Like, what's the process?
So we do a couple different things. Yeah, so we take engineered materials and convert them over to all kinds of gasket shapes through, we have some traveling head die presses, we have some vacuum CNC tables, we also do kitting, and once in a while we're on our hands and knees cutting them on the floor if we need to. So.
Okay, all right. I don't know what kitting is. What does that mean?
So kitting would be taking gaskets or just sealing parts and maybe combining them with bolts and nuts or O-rings or other types of seals for some kind of maintenance repair in the area.
Well, great. Yeah, very exciting. Any questions, thoughts,
Yeah,
concerns?
I think he answered my question, and it was more for Brent and his folks, but it doesn't sound like there's a bunch of processed water coming off of what you're doing, just scrap, right?
Yep, just the bathrooms and the
Cool.
break room.
I just want to say welcome.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Excited to be here. Yeah.
Yeah, stock some big bass in there.
I was hoping you might have done that already, but
Yeah. Don't let this guy talk into putting beehives back there. So.
you never know. You never know.
Are we good with the consent, or is you guys fine? Yes. Okay. All right, thanks again, folks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Well, actually, this is, the second part is theirs.
Yeah, right.
So.
This is theirs, too.
Yeah. Item CD4 is the license agreement that Lance talked about regarding the use of portion of Salem Lane that is drawn in red over there, that it's only being accessed by the employees of ComEd to reach the facility to the west. The right-of-way is not being vacated, it's just being given a license agreement for the use of it for parking and landscaping and curbing, and the agreement will allow the owner to use that unless there's some type of, breach of the agreement, including if they don't pay and what is going to be the estimated, the engineer opinion of probable cause for Salem Lane to be repaved in 10 years is approximately $36,000. The draft that was presented before you states $50,000, so that's off. The agreement has been renegotiated, redrafted since it was uploaded to Granicus. So this item will be presented as an action item with those changes, including the term of the agreement going for 99 years. They wanted some type of assurance that they could have that use without it being every 20 years being automatically, renegotiated. So it would be a term of 99 years that would require the mayor to vote on this item. And obviously, the agreement can be terminated with the 90-day notice to the user if there's any violation, like expanding of the use when they didn't do that with prior approval. So if there's any questions, I will be more than happy to.
I would add one thing to Sunny's comment. As a part of the development plan, they have agreed to fully resurface Salem Drive, which is why the $36,000 is funded to resurface it in 10 to 12 years, or whenever Brent decides that we want to resurface it in the future. So it's one of the reasons why we thought this could be a good beneficial deal for the city, is we have a overly wide road that serves no purpose but to go to a dead end of a substation. It allows them to have parking and increase the green space on their site. It gives us a newly resurfaced road and funds to resurface it in the future as well. So there's really a lot of win-wins for the city from a capital standpoint.
Will there be a curb between the parking area and the street, like traditional two lanes, curb
You mean in the street itself?
In the third lane where you're making.
Yeah, so it basically is designed just like a parking lot. So there would be 20, I forget the exact distance, but there's between 24 to 26 feet as a drive aisle, which is a two-way drive aisle, and then the 18 feet for the parking spaces themselves. So we have a 42-foot wide street that doesn't serve anybody.
All right, well, it's on for action?
Yes.
So, well, good, if there's no other questions. All right, next we've got release of bond and initial acceptance for the Thornton's Lockport.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Council. PW-1 this evening is for the release of the bond and initial acceptance of the site improvements for Thornton's. Thornton's was recently constructed and has been operating in the city for a period of time, a couple months now. We're asking for council's consideration to accept all of the improvements, and with that comes the bond release. So there will be a full release of the existing bond, and then this is contingent upon a 12-month guarantee, so basically swapping, as I've mentioned in the past. We give back the 1 year, or the full guarantee, and we get a 10% 1 year maintenance guarantee in its place. Asking for council's consideration to approve resolution number 23-094 to release the bond for Thornton's Lockport, contingent on the city receiving the 12-month maintenance guarantee from the developer for 10% of the original amount of the bond.
All right,
Asking for
any other thoughts, questions?
consent.
Okay, sounds good. It's consent. All right, PW2.
PW-2, this is to council consider the acceptance of a proposal from Chamlin and Associates. Can we move forward, Sonny? Thank you. Sorry about that. All right, thank you. That was it. Yep. So this evening, we have, as we continue to look to improve our corridors, Illinois 171 Archer is at New Avenue. We've been looking at improving through some channelization, turn lanes, signalization potentially. So this project takes that a little bit farther north, up to 151st Street. What we would be looking to do would be to channelize that area, so essentially creating a bidirectional turn lane, additionally looking at utilities, looking at potential extensions of water main, sanitary sewer, and really looking to help make this a safer route for our motorists, for our residents, and for those traveling through Lockport. We budgeted $250,000 for the Phase 1 engineering services. The contract that we've received, the proposal, is in the amount of $203,000. So we're asking for council's consideration this evening to approve resolution 23-093, accepting the proposal from Chamlin and Associates in the amount of $203,000.
Okay, questions, concerns, thoughts?
I got a question. Could this ever become a IDOT project, since it's 171? I mean, if we do the design, can we pass it on to IDOT for final construction?
So our hope, what our hope would be is that this would become STP eligible. That would become an 80-20 in the future, just like we're hoping that Archer and New Avenue today. So if you had to ask me if we would do this without that STP grant, I would probably say that we wouldn't, that unless we were able to get that funding, it likely wouldn't make sense for the city to do that. As far as IDOT doing it, I will tell you there's a 99.9% chance they will never, ever do it.
Yeah, IDOT seems to think their mission is to, I don't know, not deal with roads. I don't know.
We use federal and local dollars to fix state roads.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions, thoughts? Okay. Are we okay with the consent on this? Okay.
Excuse me, Mayor, City Council, can I request a 2-minute break before we go into?
Yes, because that's kind of a long talk for the last one, so why don't we do that? We'll do a 2-minute break, and then we'll get back to PW3, and we'll go from there. All right, me friends, let's dig into PW3.
Let me give you these two, Ben.
Thanks for the song you were humming.
I didn't even know I was humming. This is bad. Oh, my gosh. I think that was just leaking out of my ears. I don't even remember humming it. Oh, more.
Ready to rock and roll? All right. Going to present PW-3 this evening. PW-3 is in regards to our proposed capital improvement plan. This would be a 2024 through 2030 capital improvement plan. We have completed 2, give or take, capital improvement plans to date. We've made some modifications from what the originals were. We started working on capital improvement plans in the city in approximately 2012, 2013. Since then, we have completed over 150 blocks in the city, which I think is incredible. And that is a round of applause for you all, because again, that is, in 10 years, you have allowed the department, allowed the staff. 150 blocks is, like I said, it's absolutely incredible. So I thank you for that. This is taking us into that next stage where we're going to continue to do more of the same, along with a couple big ticket items, which is our treatment plant and a lift station at Bonnie Bray. So this evening, what we're looking to do is talk a little bit about talk a little bit about the PowerPoint that's not showing up here this evening. So we did pass them out.
Sorry. If we have to, I'll go get one. It's not in the deck. Okay, be right back.
Yeah, if we can go to
Oh.
the agenda.
Look at the smarts on you. I'm Brent's fan of white here, so go ahead, keep talking.
So as we're going to pull up the PowerPoint. So the agenda this evening, what we're going to talk about is the capital improvement plan, what we're looking to do, what we're looking to accomplish, what we would ask for council to consider as important key projects. Also our wastewater treatment plant, as council is aware, we have presented, along with Alderman McDonald, some detailed photos and information about why we need to look at our treatment plant. Our existing treatment plant is undersized, and it's also falling apart. The one MGD that we have down there was constructed in the late 50s, and it's met the end of its life cycle. So we do need some improvements. We need some expansion. We also have IGA review and limitations. So basically, who else is a partner with us in this process? We've got Bonnie Bray, Lockport Heights. We've got Illinois American Water, and then we've also potentially have some Homer Glen residents. So we do have some opportunities to talk through those. We've also got our water sewer rate options and our new revenue options. And really, those are the topics for this evening. Number one topic, though, is understanding our CIP. So anytime we're here to ask for funding, we want to, our job is to tell you why. Why is it important? Why are we asking for it? Why do we want you to consider helping not helping, allowing, us to try to continue to work through our improvements. Like I said, we've done 150 blocks in the city, and I think that those folks who have either not been through the city lately or even those who have, as they continue to work through our legacy Lockport, which, is essentially 2nd Street down to 18th Street, State over to Madison, it is completely transformed, and I really do believe that it's given the city a brand-new look. I think that the residents, the schools, the churches, I think everything is more connected. Pedestrian walkways are more accessible than they've ever been. We have the ability to get people through town now more easily than they ever have, in a safer manner than they ever have. We have water main that we have replaced, again, 150 blocks of water main, miles and miles and miles of water main. In addition, we've got services that we've replaced. We've got lead services that we've replaced. We've got undersized main. I know, Darren, this is something that he's talked about, and it's, again, something the city should be incredibly proud about, is our ability to, if we were to have a fire, if we were to need fire suppression, if we were to need downtown now, if we were, God forbid, to have a fire, we have the ability to, to put that fire out, to have the available flows, pressures, size of the main. We have those abilities now, again, because of the CIP to date. So I just want to impress upon the improvements, what they mean. It's not just prettying up the city. What you don't see is that water main, that sanitary sewer, the storm sewer, and those are the keys, and especially the storm sewer when it comes to life safety. There's not much more important than being able to have clean, quality drinking water, fire flows, like I said, pressures where they need to be. So with that CIP summary, I'm not going to go through each individual project, but you can see on an annual basis from 24 through 30, we're looking at $170 million worth of improvements. These $170 million worth of improvements do include a treatment plant, does include Bonnie Bray, Lockport Heights, sanitary districts, their wastewater being treated. So out of this, there is a large chunk that is coming due just to continue to provide service to our residents and our businesses. That's our treatment plant wastewater end of the world. Beyond that, we've got our MFT funds, our capital funds, our water sewer funds. So each of those go towards a specific type of repair, specific type of improvement. MFT funds, those can be used for our roadways and our storm sewer. Capital, roadways and our storm sewer, storm water, and then water and sewer, that is water main, wells, and then our sewer portion is our treatment plants and our sewer collection system. So those are specific funds that can be only used for specific items. So if we're looking at, well, can we just move capital over to water sewer over to MFT? That's why we have it delineated the way that we do. EPA loan, that is for our EPA low-interest loan for our treatment plants. So what we would be looking to do, I don't know if this has been confirmed yet, but those are looking like a 30-year term. Again, it gives us and offers us the dollars up front to make the improvements that we need and spread it over a longer life at a lower interest rate than we would if we went out just to a commercial banking location. So with that, we'll move on. And again, that's the CIP summary. We're not going to get into great detail on the specific projects. Here's our 150 plus blocks, like I mentioned. Again, this is an incredible map when you start to look at this and really puts into perspective what has been done over the last 10 years. Here's our proposed CIP projects. So you can see we're starting to branch out from our legacy Lockport area. We're going to finish hopefully over the next 2 years with 11th and 12th Street with some additional, we've got a little bit on Washington, a little bit on Hamilton, a little bit on Jefferson. But that will essentially, that will complete our, like I said, our legacy Lockport area. From there, then we're able to start branching out into some other areas that are in the 1960s, they were constructed, 1970s, they were constructed. Water main is starting to reach the end of its useful life. We've also got some stormwater issues in these areas. So if you look at the projects specifically, here is one project per year. These are large-scale projects. When we do these, we try to impact our residents the least amount that we can. So if we're going to do 16 blocks, we would like to do that in 1 year if we possibly can, rather than breaking that out over 4 years. A couple reasons for that. We get significantly better pricing. We also impact our residents one season. It's a one long season, yes, but it's better than 4 short seasons or shorter seasons. It also, when we're working around our schools and our churches, we're able to impact them for 1 year rather than multiple seasons. So we've had a lot of success doing this. We've seen projects coming in versus, like I said, if we do 4 blocks in 1 year, in 2019-18, when we did 17th and Jefferson, it was about $1.5 million. The next year we did 16 blocks and we got that for $4 million. So when you start to 4 times, you know, we should have been around 6 and we were able to get it for 4. So there is significant savings by doing them in the scales that we've been able to do. Again, just to look at some details, we're looking at Maine that's 100 years old in some parts of the city. We're also looking at areas where over the last decade, 12th Street project, if we go back up to the previous slide, the 12th Street project is the blue, the dark blue. In that area, we've had 34 main breaks over the last decade. When you start to progress through here, Port Ridge, we've had 42 main breaks. The Johnson's Addition area, which is Johnson's Addition, Sisson, Connor, we've had 39 main breaks over the last decade. So we've had a significant number of breaks. One area where we don't have a lot of breaks, Calvin Grove, only 8, but that's a rear yard area. So the one break that we did have about 4 years ago was under a garage. It was impossible to fix. We had to cap it on 2 ends, and then we had dead ends in our city, which we never want to do because of the lack of being able to, if we did have an emergency, we want to be able to serve that from 2 sides. Just like an electric line, you want to have multiple points of access, you want to have water main looped. So that's why that project, the importance of that project. So anyway, this is just, again, this is a detail of why. You can see the photos, you can see the conditions of our roads. We're trying to improve those on an annual basis, and again, we are making significant strides. If we would have shown these pictures 6-8 years ago, these pictures would have been even worse, and there would have been more of them across the city. The lower left-hand corner is also, it's a very nice picture to show. We are still missing some pedestrian walkways, so we would love to be able to just, you know, finish off some of these pedestrian areas. This is near the high school, near Central, and it just, with some additional sidewalk, we could get our children, our students to and from school on a pedestrian sidewalk. So this is what the map that I really like, because again, it shows us filling in those gaps, and it shows, you know, what the next 7 years would look like if we were able to complete all of these projects. Again, we're branching out farther away from the downtown area, and we're taking care of projects in areas that are in desperate need, based on main breaks, based on existing conditions of the roadway, and based on existing conditions of the storm sewer. So this is next section of the presentation. Wastewater capacity is, again, where we're talking about $60, $70, $80 million worth of improvements needed over the next 5 years. How did it get here? I know that's always the question. I know that that's always something that I ask, that's something that you ask, it's something that our residents ask. And, you know, like I think any good operator and any good city operations, staff has done a fantastic job of running this with limited improvements over the years. They have done a fantastic job. This predates me by many years here at the city, but I think the city staff has done a great job. It's just concrete wears out, steel wears out. There's nothing more that can be said. Especially in the corrosive environment, like a treatment plant, our steel on this section our walkways are done, our railings are done. We're at a point now where we've roped them off, and we're just trying to limp it along until we get to this next phase. If we don't, we're throwing good money at bad. I try not to do that. As much as it would be nice to replace all that steel, we got a quote, and it was over $1 million to get that. It was pushing $2 million, and it's just not worth it for a couple of years. So the wastewater capacity itself is another reason. So we've got the decaying of a portion of the existing Division Street treatment plant. We've also got an expiring plant at Bonnie Brae. Bonnie Brae treatment plant was installed about 23 years ago, and it was a package plant. A package plant is essentially what happens is you come out with steel, you build everything above ground. It's supposed to be there for 20 years. It's to get you through. It's a temporary plant. No concrete, very little concrete. I don't want to say none, but very little amount of concrete. Everything, like I said, is above ground. Unfortunately, when you do that, you have steel. Again, steel in a corrosive environment. We have holes in our tanks. We're welding pieces onto these tanks to make sure they continue to work. We have the corrosion that's happening within the tanks. So in order to address some of this, what we're having to do is we're currently looking at removing all of the liquid from that tank. When we do that, since it's essentially sitting on top of the ground, that tank tends to float. So now what we have to do is, because of the high water table in that area, we're pumping down the high water, pumping that water level down to allow, after we do remove that water, to keep it in the ground, go in, make our improvements, and then we're able to put the water back in and it's able to continue to function. But again, these are things that are occurring because we're beyond the lifespan. I want that to be as clear as I can, beyond the lifespan, the expected lifespan of this plant. So the good and the bad, though, of this is now we get to kind of figure out what we need. We don't have to go in there and replace an expiring plant one for one. Currently, there's 2.2 MGD capacity at Bonnie Brae. Our current daily flows there are under 1 MGD. So what does that mean? What does that mean for us moving forward, for a city? How does that improve? How does that help us? Instead of taking 5 plus 2.2 and saying we need a 7.2 MGD plant, which we clearly don't based on the current flows, we're asking for council's consideration to expand our division plant to 6.2. We would eliminate the Bonnie Brae expiring plant. We would put a lift station in its place. We would put force main, which is essentially pressurized sanitary sewer that allows a pump to push that flow down to our treatment plant. That gets us down to division, and at that point, we're able to, again, treat everything that is currently in the city of Lockport, currently in Bonnie Brae Forest Manor, and currently in Lockport Heights. That takes care of all of those flows. It additionally takes care of the projects like Lance mentioned this evening, the projects that we have on the books. Folks have come in, they've got entitlements, they've got a plan, they've got something on the books that we've seen. It's on the zoning map, it's annexed into the city. There's something quantifiable that we're looking for, other than just saying, we might, all of that white area, that may someday develop and, we need 10 MGD. That's not what we're doing. We're trying to be as pragmatic as we possibly can and build this for what we know is coming. And yes, we are putting in a little bit of additional capacity for when we get that next big development. But again, we're talking this much, not what we have today, which is this much. So what we'll end up with is 6.2 MGD capacity down at Division. Bonnie Brae, like I said, will be gone. Regional shared expansion study. I know this is something that's been discussed as well. We talked about this 2018. We talked about the opportunity to maybe pick a new location. That did not prove out. The expenses were exorbitant, and it really wouldn't have been a significant improvement for the city. Positive news is there is some EPA money potentially available for consolidation. So when we're going to regionalize a plant, meaning we're going to take Bonnie Bray and Division, create one, they like to see that. Less permitting, less potential for issues, less potential for environmental impacts. So again, what we have is the potential to receive some additional funding there. None of that has been included in our existing proposal. And then just a rule of thumb, every MGD today is about 25 million to build. And again, that's only going up as I'm talking. It's actually, I just saw it go up. So unfortunately, it just continues to go up. It doesn't, I just don't think there's any stop to it, unfortunately, but that's the rule of thumb. That's generally where we're at. Why are we a little bit higher than that? We're talking about we have to remove the existing 1 MGD from our treatment plant. It's already, like I said, decaying past our lifespan. So who's affected? Potential stakeholders. Talked a little bit about this already. Not going to get into great detail, but we have a list of people that are our stakeholders, the people that we're impacting, and we're looking to treat everybody fairly and treat them all just as City of Lockport residents. We want to treat everybody equally. We do have some key agreement deadlines that will potentially impact us a little bit. Will Homer Glen look to us for any of their treatment? That's an unknown. If they were, we would have to ask for the money to improve or to increase our capacity, because right now we do not have them in our capacity. But like I said, we do, however, have Bonnie Bray and Lockport Heights. I've already gone through this in great detail, so I'm not going to touch on it again. And now comes the fun. So this evening we do have a couple folks from Baxter and Woodman with us. They put a lot of time and effort into this, along with city staff. It was a citywide effort to really put this all together, because there's a financial component, there's a CIP component, there's an engineering component, there's a development component. So it really is a complete team effort here, and it's like I said, it's something that I think we should all be very proud of, getting to this point. And Baxter is going to be here this evening. Tim's going to come up, kind of talk about all the detail in an expedited manner, because I know Tim can probably talk about this for days. But here you go, Tim.
Hold on, Brent, before that happens, I just have a couple
Yep.
questions. So next we'll be talking about cost and how to fund it.
Yes.
But if we're looking at doing 6.2 MGD, how easy is it? And that takes care of all of our current needs, like you said, things that look like they're on the docket. But if, say, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, development happens in some of these white areas, right, unincorporated areas, future councils and landowners, sell and do development, how easy is it to expand to 7 or 7.5? Is it, and I guess I'm asking it like this, like if you build something, is it problematic to build it to, is there a way that you build it that makes future expansion easier?
Absolutely, yes. And what we've done is we've done a feasibility study, and we're actually beyond that now to where Baxter and Woodman is doing this design. They have basically phases. So this is really what we're calling phase 2. So our phase 1, last year, we finished our Headworks project. Our phase 2 is getting us to 6.2. Phase 3, phase 4, there's an 8, give or take, MGD, and then there's the 10 MGD. So we have actually laid out what that would look like. So we would look at the clarifiers, we would look at the controls, we would look at what different options we have, what land we need.
Okay.
So yes, to answer your question,
All right,
absolutely.
good. That was my question, because I didn't want to be like, if these idiots had put the thing over here, we could have expanded to 8, but, okay, so you're thinking through that already, thank you.
Yes.
And then, just a heads up on the Homer Glen thing, I talked to Mayor Nietzsche over there about what do you guys want to do? You're looking at connecting? I think that's what they seem to be open to, but the real question is, like, we just need to understand the cost, because they have cost estimates at, 6 million, we have cost estimates at 10 million for what they need. I guess really what they were looking was, and it's not really for us to have a conversation with them. I said, look, why don't you send your professional staff to talk with our professional staff, and your people talk to my people, and so that you guys can all come to an agreement and make everybody understand, because we need to know what their projected needs would be.
Correct.
Right? If they're going to add a quarter or a full percentage, and then get them to understand, like, this is why we think it's this cost. So that's something that I need you guys to start setting up, so.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because the way we've designed it right now is that we're not including their flows in the future. If they want to come to an agreement, if both parties want to agree, then there will be an additional cost to handle that additional capacity, and we're going to ask them to pay for that, right? So it's a fair question from them. In fairness, we kind of need to know sooner than later, so I think it's all coming together here to find out but great idea. Have their engineers talk to our engineers. So.
Okay. All right, thanks. All right, fellas, please.
Good evening, everyone. I know everyone loves talking about money. I was actually at a village board meeting last night, and I went for 3 hours, so I have been asked to keep this to the highlight reels of what we kind of did for the city of Lockport to evaluate the impacts to the water and sewer funds specifically. One thing, too, I'd like to add as far as the question from the mayor regarding the capacity to the wastewater team, and I know this is something that Brent and our own wastewater team are looking at, but there are actually limitations to be considered based on what is anticipated development versus what is unanticipated development. There are 2 key metrics when sizing a wastewater treatment plant. One is the hydraulic capacity, so that's just the amount of flow in water, or wastewater technically. But the other is biologic. So if there is a developer that approaches the city of Lockport that was unforeseen or unplanned, that has very, very high industrial waste or other types of biological loadings that start to exceed it, those are the 2 capacity metrics that we're actually taking a look at when we conduct our wastewater facility planning reports specifically. But with that said, turning our attention to water and sewer rate overviews, there are 3 major things that we kind of look to do with every water and sewer rate study that we conduct. The first is going to be a cost of service analysis. So this is taking a look at the past 5 to 6 years worth of revenues and expenses. We typically go that far now just because of the anomalies that arose as part of COVID-19 specifically, as well as the pandemic. So we tend to go back right now to about 2018 to just observe patterns that exist with what are nominal rate increases, what are inflationary rate increases, are there big steps or jumps that we need to account for that might be cyclical greater than a 3-year cycle and so on. Then the next step we take is taking a look at your user groups and rate structure analysis. So a big focus for us as part of conducting a rate study is looking at the fairness or the equitability of a rate structure to ensure that we are not disproportionately impacting or technically subsidizing, our rates and the necessary revenues on any one user group that exists within the city of Lockport. So as part of our work, we did actually go through pretty much every single bill that the city issued over a series of 3 years, I believe, to conduct our analysis. And so there is a lot of data embedded to this. If there are any questions at any time, please let me know. Finally, the last step is the rate stabilization analysis. Essentially, this is a fancier way of saying the city has had the foresight to conduct a lot of these studies well in advance of when the expenditures are going to hit the water and sewer fund, specifically the larger capital improvement objects, such as the wastewater improvements, right? By knowing when these things are going to come and as well as a predicted cost for these, we can start to knowingly operate at both surpluses and deficits without necessarily putting the city in financial risk of going below its minimum fund balance. That way we can modulate, the rate year over year. So instead of necessarily having a surprise one year and having to hike rates by 10, 15%, we can try and stagger this over years and really flatten that impact across the city's customers. With that said, the highlight reels for tonight are going to be 4 major scenarios. I'm going to go through this very quickly because there are going to be slides that follow this that go into greater depth. But scenario 0 is called a baseline scenario for us. This is essentially just a boundary condition in which we take a look at what would happen to the city's financial projections with no further rate increases under its capital loading. Then we have scenario 1C, in which we are taking a look at raising rates under the city's existing rate structure specifically, so no changes to the structure, just what would the increases be in order to finance its projected capital improvements as well as operating and maintenance expenses. Then we have scenarios 2B and 2C. I'm not going to go, again, into great detail just yet because there are future slides that cover this, but essentially this is starting to take a look at alternative rate structure elements that start to augment the city's existing rate structure to try and set more fair and equitable rates. There's a minor difference between 2B and 2C that we'll touch on as we get to those. With that said, I'm going to walk everyone through the colors, the lines, and the bars. With the lines, that's going to be the city's projected revenues. In the bars are going to be the city's projected expenses. The dotted blue line that kind of runs towards the bottom, that's going to be your revenue from the rates and fees. The line that goes on top of that essentially are going to be the expected or anticipated loan disbursements to cover the debt-funded capital coming up as projected. In the bars, we have red being the city's operating and maintenance expenditures, essentially. The next color up, the salmon color we'll call that, is going to be the projected debt service. You can see that that starts to climb beginning in fiscal year 29. Again, these are from the anticipated debts being used for the wastewater improvement. Then in the blue and green, right now they're going to look equal, and that's because during the development of these graphs, we didn't have enough time to necessarily isolate the water versus the sewer, so we just took the total, cut it in half for the sake of just demonstration. But essentially, in some years, we're spending a little bit more on water, and in some years, we're spending a little bit more on sewer. Two things I'd like to point out is that if you look at the dotted blue line towards the bottom, for all practical purposes, through the majority of the projection, we actually are bringing in sufficient revenue to cover the operating and maintenance expenses, again, the red bar, plus the city's existing debt service. Where that starts to fall off, of course, is fiscal year 30, once the additional debt kind of hits the fund specifically. However, even with the loan disbursement line way up top, we can generally see with the proposed capital improvement projects at its kind of full capacity, we are operating at a deficit every single year. So I don't know that this would surprise anyone to see that with no further rate increases under that projected capital loading, we go below zero somewhat quickly. To quickly explain this graph too, and again, you'll see this in a few slides, the blue line is going to be the projected fund balance in cash for the water and sewer fund. The green is going to be the capital reserve goal, which sits on top of the red line, which is the minimum fund balance or operating reserve goal, which is currently set at 25% of the water and sewer fund's operating expenditures annually, less capital, debt, and depreciation.
And just to be clear, this graph shows with us doing this expansion and the work.
Yes.
This isn't like, this is where we are if we don't do anything. This is us if we do the work that you're proposing to do.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to clarify it. That's okay.
With that, we want to spend a little bit more time on the city's existing rate structures, as this is going to be a common theme as we go through the other scenarios tonight. So if we take a look at the left-hand side where you see that per 1,000 gallons for water and sewer, that's what's called a volumetric rate. Now, at face value, that might sound fair where you pay what you use. But when you start to really take a look at the city's expenditures as far as can you support a 6,000 gallon user, which is a typical resident or so, versus a customer who's using about 500,000 gallons per month or 5 million gallons per month within the city. And although the city doesn't have a 5 million gallon user, it does have some larger users that are sitting between 500 and about 1 million gallons. And that is significant. That cost is nonlinear. Then if we take a look on the right-hand side with the surcharge fees, this is going to be a fixed fee that's applied monthly to all customers. Again, as we go through this, I will be giving examples such as if everyone gets a bill, that postage cost everyone pays. So it generally makes sense that everyone can pay the same rate. But if we start taking a look at the cost of the larger infrastructure needed to support larger customers, we can start to see a similar pattern like we did in the volumetric, that it presents a nonlinear pattern. An easy example to understand is if you have one residential customer and one industrial customer sitting side by side and you build a water tower, you wouldn't necessarily ask the resident to pay the same amount as that industrial customer. Right now, this works because the quantity of residential customers is compensating for the relatively few but large quantity volume users that exist currently. So as part of this analysis, we're going to go do a deep dive into that here in a few. To quickly recap on scenario 1C, this is going to be the rate increases specifically under the city's current rate structure. So that's that volumetric water sewer rate plus the fixed fee where everyone pays the same. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think what I just want to make sure everybody understands is we've got two competing ways of generating this money. We're looking to generate the exact same amount of money. We're looking to be able to do the exact same amount of projects. This allows us to do it in the existing structure. So again, you're going to look at 7% over the first 3 years, 5% beyond there, additional surcharge rates. Everybody gets the same. Every single user, resident, commercial, industrial, gets the exact same. So, you know, obviously we're pushing that narrative here, but I want everybody to understand that. So this was kind of an eye-opener for me, quite honestly, when we went through this and we're talking and Baxter explained it in a way that when you're looking at a 12-inch water main, that resident may not need that 12-inch water main. That may be needed because we have a heavy user. Should that heavy user have to pay a little bit more when that water main gets replaced? If the resident doesn't need it, if 100 residents, if 1,000 residents don't need that, but one single user does because, you know what, in a fire situation, their fire flow demands that, that is something that we wanted to bring to council for consideration. Should we try to offset some of those?
And something to add to that too is that the nature of a water and sewer utility fund is classified as an enterprise fund. What this means is that we don't really rely on outside revenues, right? Almost the entirety of the revenue source comes from these exact rates and fees. And ultimately what that means is we are balancing the need to address your aging infrastructure, the need to upsize your capacity, the ability to stay ready to serve new customers, all comes from these rates and fees. And so that's where our analysis to take a look at that alternative rate structure is making sure that these rate structures are fair and equitable to make sure that, again, fair is fair. People should pay for the cost burden that they're inflicting on the city in order to support its infrastructure. One thing, too, I'd actually like to correct myself on, per the mayor's question to me, was under that baseline scenario, that was actually evaluating what we would call the fully funded CIP. So the city has been very proactive over the past few years specifically to identify through engineering studies, both on the water and wastewater side, what, in a perfect world where money isn't an issue, should we be spending to address our aging infrastructure? If we take a look at that fully funded CIP, these numbers start to be fairly staggering fairly quickly. And ultimately, this is a balance because all of these needs are counterbalanced by what we find as acceptable rate increases to the customers year over year. And so, as Brent alluded to earlier, you have to make do to some degree with what you can afford and what you can tolerate on a year-to-year basis because that's the reality of the situation. However, one thing we did want to point out is that it's always cheaper to be proactive versus reacting to an emergency, always in a water and wastewater situation. And as part of that, working with city staff over several meetings, we came to what we call a reduced CIP where these rates that we were generating and projecting weren't starting to get outlandish, right? We're trying to keep reasonable rates that you'll see here in a couple slides under this reduced CIP. The key thing here to understand, though, is that this does ultimately mean that we're trying to play catch up year over year for every year that we don't fully fund the needs of the system. And it's not like we can just catch up in a single year, 20 years from now, to just do 60 million, 100 million in a given year, because that's just not practical. It tends to then be a pattern of break and fix until you can catch back up. So that's where the driver is for really talking about rates today, really talking about those alternative rate structures to, again, make sure that if we do need to raise rates, are we raising it to the right customers? Are we making sure that they're paying their fair share?
I just want to clarify something about this slide here. This capital improvement plan pricing, are you including all the road and stuff in here, or is this just water
This
CIP.
capital plan only reflects the water and sewer portions of those cumulative projects that do have roadway improvements on them.
Okay, all right. So it's a little bit both. It's not just the water treatment plant that I'm looking at here. This is about replacing pipes and lines
Correct.
throughout the
Annual
city.
sewer main replacements, televising.
So it's a little bit of an overlap between the water rate and the CIP. Okay.
Correct. With that said, under scenario 1C, essentially, again, with that rate stabilization, you'll see actually that we can allow the fund to operate at a slight deficit in the beginning years. This is a commendation really to the city to have a reserve in place for communities that don't maintain a healthy reserve in their water and sewer utility funds. This immediate driver, this immediate need to start financing capital all of a sudden can either mean two things: debt or a significant rate hike in the next year or two. However, with how the city has operated its water and sewer fund balance, we've been able to really mitigate that initial rate shock and spread this out over a longer period of time. And time is crucial for us because obviously the compounding effect of raising these rates over time has a big role as far as adjusting and course correcting, because obviously we are projecting these costs several years out, but as Brent was mentioning, that cost is going up by the minute I speak. And so it's all about having a year-over-year analysis on this. The hardest parts are adopting a rate structure as well as building a financial model. You have a financial model already, so it gets easier and easier to just refine this as numbers become solidified or as things get closer. Ultimately, what we wanted to do, if you look again in the blue line, that's going to be the projected cash fund balance. We are depleting the current reserves essentially and dipping below that green line, which again is the ideal capital reserve goal that sits on top of the red line, which is the minimum fund balance. You do see that after kind of the initial shock of the upcoming capital improvements, the fund does start to rebound as you approach 2031 under the current projected rate increases. The next few slides are just a series of bills, and I am going to try and go a little bit fast through these so we don't, again, stand here for 3 hours, hopefully, just assessing these numbers. One thing I would like to point out, however, is we made an update to the bottom of the two tables here. It had a slight computational error in the sewer charge, unfortunately, and it didn't make it into this copy of the PowerPoint. However, that has been rectified already. So as we go through these, the key user groups that we were taking a look at were residential, both an average user of about 4 kgals. Generally, this would represent a senior couple, about 2 to 3 family members living in a single-family home. That tends to range from about 4,000 gallons monthly to about 6,000 gallons monthly. Once you start talking about a family of 4 to 5 or a larger home with irrigation, you can see numbers up to that 15,000 gallons, which is supposed to be the graph on the bottom. Again, there is an error that's been corrected since. Next, our primary concern was also making sure that the seniors weren't necessarily hit too hard. There are two things, though, that I'd like to bring to your attention, specifically that although many communities will look at what that percent increase is, what you'll find very quickly is that a percent can be misleading. If a customer's bill is actually already really low, $1 starts to have a pretty significant percent increase on there. So our advice typically when looking at these senior bills is monitoring not just the percentage, but the actual dollar increase as well as their actual bill, and not necessarily just fixating on that percentage, because that starts to skew the numbers if you actually start to look at them too closely. After that, we took a look at small to medium commercial users. Again, these are based on real bills, so we have a 28 kgal user, which was consistent with a small restaurant in town for the city of Lockport. The bottom one is an 89,000 gallon monthly bill for a equivalent hotel lodging type facility, again, from the city of Lockport. And finally, on the largest user group end, we have a medium grocery store using about 102,000 gallons monthly. And finally, a large industrial user in town that was using 590,000 gallons monthly. With all of my talk then about the city's existing rate structure, there are two kind of alternative rate structure elements we wanted to bring to the city's attention, because honestly, for utility rates, if you start to look at your electric bill or your natural gas bill, you'll quickly find that water and sewer utilities are well behind the curve as far as setting fair and equitable rates in order to compensate for their infrastructure specifically. The first element we introduced was the fixed scaled meter, and what this is adjusting that fixed charge, the right-hand side of the table where it was $10 for water and I believe $7 for sewer currently monthly that everyone pays. We're going to scale that up based on your water meter size. Now, this is consistent practice with how developers actually ask for their planned water usage. And what this is trying to do, as Brent mentioned earlier, is trying to have those customers that make that burden for the city pay their fair share. These meter ratios are developed based on a standard formula as far as how we size water meters for customers based on their planned usage. One thing I'd like to note, however, too, is that just because someone has a larger meter does not necessarily mean they use more water. That's a common misconception, that a larger meter just uses a larger amount of water. Larger meters is actually more consistent with fire suppression. And what this starts to get into is customers will say, well, I have a 6-inch meter, but I used 0 water. Well, if they had a fire and they used it, all of that infrastructure had to have been in place well before you allowed a 6-inch meter to connect. So that's where we start to disassociate that volumetric rate from the fixed rate. It's the cost of having the ability to serve someone, not just what they're using on top of it. Next, we took a look at the inclining block volumetric rate structure to address the volumetric side. Again, this is a similar theory or philosophy to the fixed scaled meter, just applying it to the volumetric rate. And what this is you'll create tiers or blocks of usage, so 0 to, I think, 15,000 gallons, and then 15,000 gallons to 30,000 gallons. If a user were to only use 8,000 kgals, they're going to pay that first rate. But let's say in peak summer and everyone wants to water their lawn, they get up to 16,000 gallons for 1 month of billing. They're going to pay that first tier up to the 15,000 gallons, and then that one extra 1,000 gallons that they used, they're going to pay at that second rate, which is slightly more. And then as you keep going up in tiers, you just pay slightly progressively more, but you still get the benefit of paying tier 1, tier 2, and all the tiers below you. As part of these scenarios, we did maintain that reduced capital improvement plan, as well as removing the minimum usage charge. Again, minimum usage charges are a legacy rate structure, actually, well before the advent of fixed fees. They were the idea that just because everyone stopped using water in the winter, we could no longer pay our bills. And so minimum usage charges were generally implemented as a way to say, just because you don't use water doesn't mean you're not costing us money. With the implementation of the fixed scaled meter, we are able to remove the minimum usage charge as part of that, and that way residents really just pay for what they use, but also pay for the cost of service for the city of Lockport to make sure that they have the water at their tap. With that, the next table is essentially a breakdown of the number of accounts that exist within the city based on their meter size. One thing I'd like to point out is that the 1 meter or 1 inch meter and less generally represents 99%, if not almost 100% of the residential customer base. There are some smaller commercial and even front of house industrial segments that are fed by a 3/4 inch or 1 inch meter, but this largely is encompassing your residential tier. As you climb up, you can start to see those commercial users, industrial users, school users tend to be around 1.5 to 2 inch meters. And what we did was we spread out this impact of the meter ratio implementation over a series of 3 years. As you'll see on the right-hand side of that table, at the final year of implementation, a 6-inch meter, of which there are 2 accounts currently within the city of Lockport, would be paying 64 times that 1-inch meter or less. And while in a vacuum that might sound like a lot, once we start taking a look at the bills and you proportion that out to what they're paying today, it's almost a drop in the bucket. And again, it's all about making sure that are they paying their fair share, or are we just charging them $10 like we have been? With that said, are there any questions as far as the implementation? Again, this was deliberately chosen as part of making sure that no one year for any one customer group saw an immediate spike to their bills. So by spreading this out over 3 years, and again, this is all being able to be done by the fact that the city does have an existing reserve to allow us to spread this out over time. And that is, again, to be commended, because implementing this in 1 year can be a staggering sticker shock to certain customers, because you're ultimately ripping a Band-Aid off to reset these rates to enable you to collect revenue more fairly from your customer base, as opposed to just increasing those rates until such time that you find that we can no longer raise the fixed fee because that's starting to hurt the seniors or it's starting to hurt, residential homeowners. With that said, after reviewing the city's customer base, we ultimately decided on the following tier blocks, 0 to 10,000 kgals, which is again representative of the vast majority, if not almost all, of the residential common usage. There are times, again, during peak summer, if irrigation is a thing, where they can get up to about 15,000 gallons in a period, but that's where that excess tax on the water system and the wastewater system is readily observed. And so we did feel that that was a good boundary condition for that. And then from 10 to 30, we did notice or find that the city does have a lot of smaller businesses, and we wanted to mitigate the sticker shock kind of an impact to them specifically.
You went from scenario 1C to 2C, and 2C introduced the volumetrics portion of that?
2C implements both the fixed scaled meter and the inclining block, the timing of which are staggered out so that they're not double dipping in one given year, but both of these are part of scenario 2.
Okay.
Currently, the plan to implement right now in the model is to have the fixed scaled meter go first in that 3-phase step, starting in fiscals 24, 25, 26, and then beginning the inclining block in fiscals 27, 28. Again, this was all a deliberate attempt to minimize any 1 year's impact across the entire customer base specifically. With that, again, reviewing the customer base, we felt that the 30 kgal tier, again, limited the sticker shock to small businesses, and most of the remaining tiers up above that are then just charged at that singular rate. In theory, you could continue to pick tiers, but ultimately, in discussions with city staff, we didn't necessarily want to cause more problems for utility billing. So there is a practical limit to how many tiers you really want. You don't want to tend to go above 5. It becomes a nightmare to calculate your bill to after that. Ultimately, the two things that we're taking a look at here then are removing the senior volumetric discount and applying this, or keeping their discount on the fixed fee specifically. Part of this is because your existing senior volumetric tier is actually an inclining block. You give them a discount on the first 3,000 gallons of their bill for every gallon that they use in a single month. After that is actually charged at a non-senior rate. So this is more or less just applying that inclining block so that we don't have to deal with the senior 0 to 3. They're just all 0 to 10. And again, specifically implementing the inclining block in fiscals 27, 28 to wait after the period of the implementation of the fixed scaled meter so that we could limit the total sticker shock, again, to the customers. Ultimately, this graph is going to look real similar to the other, and that was the entire purpose of this, is to show that there are more ways than one to essentially recuperate the same amount of revenue. But what you'll find if you compare the sample bills is who it impacts. And if you do take a look at the residential customers, under scenario 1C, they are more heavily burdened because we are increasing the access fee, we are increasing the volumetric rates, and there's kind of no offset or adjustment for those larger customers. So if you were to compare those two bills, you would ultimately find under scenario 1C, the resident bill starts to increase much faster than scenario 2C. Now, conversely, the question might come, what does that do to our larger businesses? And if you look at fiscals 31 for them, and I do apologize to keep this in the highlight, I don't have my full comparison tables, but if you were to look carefully, we try and mitigate the impact by fiscal year 31. If you look at any of the years between now and fiscal year 31, you might see some differences as far as when they are paying what bill. But ultimately, our goal was to try and put them up to be about the same by fiscals 31. We do understand that the larger users, especially those with larger meters, are going to be paying a little bit more. But again, that is the cost of adjusting the rate structure and kind of resetting it to recuperate the city's expenditures associated with supporting larger customers. So that is an intentional kind of consequence there. Yeah.
So a couple things on this slide. So if you do want to do that comparison, if you wanted to go back to page 23 and look at the top table, 23 to 34, these are the comparisons. So this is kind of that key comparison that Tim mentioned. And also to come back to Alderman McDonald, to come back to your question. So 1C is the exact same structure. See, the exact same thing we do today. We're just playing with the percentages and the surcharges. So nothing more than just playing with those numbers. You can almost throw anything you want in. Like Tim said, there's a financial model that's there now. We can throw any number in. So 2C is throwing that out the window and starting over with a fixed meter. So your surcharge is now based on the size of the meter, and then your volumetric rate is based on this new volumetric rate, this inclining block. So the way that I think of it, it's just like taxes. The first $10,000 you make are taxed at 10%. Anything beyond that, up to 20,000 is, 10,001 to 20,000 is another. So that's the way to look at this. So just because it's an inclining block, oh my gosh, 30,000, it's only those gallons above 30 that you would be, charged at that increased rate. The other thing that I find very interesting about these, when we're trying to tell you and explain to you and explain to residents and explain to businesses what these dollar amounts actually mean, what these percentages mean, 7.5%, that is for this person's bill. That is for a 4,000 gallon user. If we go to 5,000, and again, this was just something, go to 5,000, that actually decreases to 6.8% increase on their bill. If you go to 6,000, it's a 6.3% increase on their bill, and if you go to 7,000, it's a 5.9%. The reason, exactly what Tim said, $1 on a very low user is a higher percentage. If you have a user of 500,000 gallons, a $2 surcharge, they're not going to feel that. A $100 surcharge, they're not going to feel that. What we have right here is on a 4,000 user, a surcharge of $2, okay, you feel it. But on a 5,000 user, you feel it a little less. On a 6,000, you feel it a little less. So again, a 7,000, if we're looking at this exact table, if you look at a 7,000, you're at 5.9%, so 1.6% lower on your overall increase. So when we try to talk about, well, what are we talking, as far as an increase, it's really dependent upon the user. It's really dependent upon what everybody uses.
I believe the remaining slides are actually just these sample bills for your comparison and for your review specifically. So I don't know if there are any questions. I'd love to talk rates all day long.
And the other thing on the residential that we see here, those first couple of years, there is that initial sticker shock. There is that initial, we do have to make that transformation into this new way of billing. We also have the need for the funds, essentially we don't need them as much as some people would because we do have some funds in the bank, but you still need to start to accrue these dollars now. If we didn't, yeah, it would be great to say we're going to, go 4% for the next 10 years. We can't do that. We've got to take a little bit of a hit, but then as you can see, and again, for a 4,000, you're at 4.2% 4 years from now. So you're under $4 a change per your bill in 4 years. So again, I know it's certainly not nothing, but
If I could add, Brent.
yeah.
My final takeaway too is that just because the fiscal year 31 numbers are here today, this model allows the city again to adjust annually. This should not be something that is set in stone. This is something that should be reviewed and updated every single year when projected endings come in as these design projects start to become material and we understand the true cost of what it is, because we are playing with assumptions, we are playing with this, inflationary numbers, and at some point that starts to get a little ridiculous 10 years out. So by making this more of a sliding window and doing this as an annual process, again, the hard part's done, the model is here. The next hard part is, do we have an ordinance in place with a rate structure that sets fair and equitable rates ready to go so that customers are used to it, they understand it, and it's there to then just start saying, maybe we don't need that 2% increase or the 3% increase, or maybe we can adjust those tier numbers specifically. None of this is concrete. It's just based on the conservative numbers and assumptions we've had to make while still keeping this practical. We are not trying to, necessarily throw pie in the sky numbers, but we're also not trying to lowball this because it's always better for the rates to come down generally than it is for them to be a surprise and go up.
One of the things we were recommending when we talked to the sanitary districts was we're looking for authorization to either stay with the current model or adopt this new structure and approve the ability to go up to these rates, right? So that as we reevaluate them from year to year, we know that we can, and again, it might be different because of different users, but if we have the authorization to go up to that certain point or those rate amounts, then they could always be less if we find out that some of this didn't cost as much as we think in 2029. Because you'll see it start to tear down. It goes from 4 to 3.9 to 3.8 as you get into the future. When we could do this exercise in the future and just make sure that we're still meeting the appropriate numbers.
Currently, we have authorization to go up to 5%, correct?
CPI, which this year is 6.5.
Well, actually, either the lower of either the CPI or the 5%.
You think that's what's in the
Yeah,
ordinance?
It's in the settlement
It
agreement.
says
yeah.
5%?
Whichever's less.
Okay.
I thought we looked at that and said it was CPI.
Yeah. I thought it was at whichever's greater.
Anyway, we can clarify that.
And again, that's a volumetric rate. So what that, if we went all the way back to 1C, what that would be, let's say it's 5%. It doesn't, for the sake of talking here, it would be 5%. What we're proposing in order to make sure that we have the funds we need would be a 7% increase. So it is slightly higher. And then also there is a $1 surcharge increase. So today, what we are allowed is 5% or CPI. Again, we'll get into that detail. So we're not far off from that, quite honestly, and especially
Residential, because the commercial, it's like 12%.
If we went 1C, it would be for both.
Okay.
Yes. And you're correct. If we went the alternate, we would be looking, you can look here and you can see medium grocery store, so you're at, yes, 11, 12.
At the highest, yeah.
Correct.
And then it goes down to 3.
Right. Yep. And so, yeah, so these are some opportunities to compare 1C versus 2C. If there's any questions, we would take those at this time. Otherwise, next is going to be some revenue topics.
So on this, you've got it from 23 today up to 31. So what do you envision, let's say this goes forward, where do you envision starting the treatment plant expansion?
25.
Okay.
So if we go back to this graph here, what we start to look at is 25. So in this is not working for me here. In this area here, that is our first payment, and you can also see that is the first loan disbursement that we would get. So this up here is our loan versus what our annual revenues are. So that would take us 25, 26, 27, 28. We would be completed in 29. These dollars essentially get swapped out for debt service. So that's why our debt service goes up here.
Mm-hmm. And all this includes like looking at Bonnie Bray as a lift station, all that kind of stuff.
Worst case scenario. So we want to come to you and tell you, this is going to take care of all of our needs for wastewater, all of our needs for water, all of our needs over the next, through 2031. So correct.
Okay. All right. Thanks. So what's next?
You want to flip to the next? So in order to fund the CIP every single year, we had to back in again, just like they did for the water rates, we had to back in to cover the road portion, storm sewer portion of those expenses. So looked at a number of different revenue options that the city has through state statute, and really found that the home rule sales tax that we have right now of 1%, which gives us about $2.6 million of revenue every year, if we double that to 2%, that would cover what we need to accomplish with doing all the CIP projects. Even if we take all of these other revenue options that are up here and add them all together, we would still not get to the $2 million figure. So we would have to raise pretty much everything that we have available to us to be able to accomplish what we need to do the CIP project as it stands. So that's what we're proposing.
Okay, so let me be clear for everybody who's maybe watching or just hearing this kind of stuff for the first time. There's two different things going on here. There's water rates, which by law, when it comes to water and sewer, has to be funded through water rates.
Correct.
And that includes sewer pipeline going down a street. That's part of where the water rate increase helps fund that.
Correct.
And then at the same time, when we replace a water main in an old street, we're not doing it magically, right, with a transporter. Like, we beam out we have to rip up the street and tear it all up. And when we do it, that's when we're replacing curbs and sidewalks and fixing the street and those things. And that has to be paid for differently.
Correct.
You can't use water and sewer rates.
Correct.
So the water sewer rate funding that we just talked about was very thorough and well thought out. That pays for water treatment plant and new water sewer pipelines. Then this stuff that Lisa's about to start on is how we'd have to pay for the sidewalks, the roads, the streets, the paving, all that, which is separate from the water rate. Just for clarification.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. One thing that Ben just threw up here, and this is a great slide because I think it shows our comparables. That's one of the biggest questions that we get is where do we compare? How does our neighbor look? You know, what is it? What do these mean? Where does this put us? Right now, you can see that Lockport with the suggested number 2C, so what we just presented to you, that increase would put us right in the middle of all of our neighbors. You can see Homer, Crest Hill, New Lenox, Romeoville, Lamont would still be ahead of us. Joliet, Plainfield, Frankfurt, Orland, Mokina would be slightly lower. We do know that Joliet has just come out and given everybody the 12% increase for the next 5 years. So we know that 12% will be, or Joliet will be leapfrogging us shortly. We know that New Lenox has just put out 10% increases every May 1st for the next, through 2027. So again, we know that New Lenox will continue to climb. And then again, also, we know that our surrounding communities, bless you, our surrounding communities are also looking at new improvements for potential lake water. Romeoville, Crest Hill, so they're going to need to continue to do improvements in order to get that lake water if that is the route they ultimately go.
And if our current rates were put onto this, it would be between Joliet and the Lockport suggested, just for anybody who cares. It's like 77 something. So
Correct.
It's not like currently we're down under Mokina.
Correct.
It's essentially right where it is. I mean, we don't rank up or down.
So what I was speaking about was increasing the home rule sales tax, and what we have here is what our neighboring municipalities are charging for their total sales tax rate. So it's not just our home rule portion, the total portion. Of course, everybody knows that those that are in Cook County pay a substantial amount of an increase because of the Cook County tax on there. But you'll see that even with the increase, we're up to 9%. There's still many municipalities above us, so we're not taking ourselves to the max. We're only taking what we need to be able to accomplish the CIP projects that we have.
And so currently, we're 8%.
We're at 8, yeah, exactly.
Correct. And this is just kind of again, an anecdotal slide. I thought was kind of neat. We saw another community had done this. And so when you look at, what our water costs per gallon, not per 1,000 gallons, per gallon, we are 1 penny per gallon, 1 penny. We will now be 1 penny and 2/10, if you round up, of a penny. So again, when we're talking about our water, and you know, this, again, this is more anecdotal, but when we look at, you know, a gallon of bottled water at the store, you're paying 100 times. You know?
Is it feasible that a senior user uses 1,000 gallons a month? I mean, is that?
Yeah, we use 2,000. We use.
Well, who's this we?
My wife.
I meant a senior, one senior.
Well, we have the minimum charge of 2,000.
Nah, you won't anymore. So
Well,
a
that's how we
senior,
pay even less.
yeah, one senior living by themselves with one water meter can see their bill possibly go down.
Correct.
So based upon this, since in 15 months I get the senior rate, and since we average about 2,000 gallons a month, so we take all surcharge and everything and add in the waste management, it's actually about $20 less per month based upon 2C calculations.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good.
Well, and I think that is probably our most sensitive population, would be the single senior. You know, they require just as much space as, you know, a married couple. In the most part, they need a bedroom, they need a kitchen, they use water. And so I like that minimum is going away.
So, I understand the treatment plant, we've got to expand it, I get it. And fixing the lift station in Lockport, or turning Bonnie Bray into a lift station, I mean, all that is necessary and has to happen. And I understand the water rate restructuring for that. When it comes to the 1% sales tax increase, I understand how, like, some of this, they overlay, right? Because you can't fix a pipe if, you know, without tearing up the road. So you have to pay for them both at the same time. However, the projects, the water rate, as we're assessing the needs for it with our bar graphs, that's not just about the water treatment plant. That's about assessing the needs that we're going to have to expand the water treatment plant, create a lift station, and replace sewer pipes throughout the city.
That is this map that you're seeing, so correct.
Okay.
All of that work.
Because when we've discussed this in the past, you know, and I've said this to a couple council members, it's like, what's the scenario if we pace out the road reconstruction projects every other year? If we do something every other year, do we have to increase the tax rate by 1%? Can we, like, just hold off? Like, for instance, you know, at my house this year, my refrigerator's shot, but I can live without the ice maker, right? The ice maker doesn't work and the drawers are all broken, right? But it still works. My furnace, my boiler took a dump, and that I really can't live without, right? I gotta have that. So I replaced that, and that was $5,000. And, you know, I got two other things. My bathtub, micro silk blower's not working. Okay, we could still take a tub without the funny bubbles, right? And then the fireplace starter's not working. So these are all little expenses. So I'm going to say, all right, I'd love to say I'm going to do it all, but my income hasn't changed. So I have to either go out and get some new jobs, right, to bring in the income, or I just space it out. I'm going to do the $5,000 boiler this year, and I'm going to space out these other things over time. And I'm trying to say, like, looking at this city budget in the same fashion, is there spacing out the road reconstruction projects every other year? Does that, or what does it have to look like in order for us not to have to raise it 1%? If you're saying, like, Steve, we can keep it the same, but you have to space these out not every other year, but every 4 years, right? Which would be untenable. So I'm trying to understand, before we make a decision, how can we spread projects out? Can we spread them out further and be palatable right? Not pushing stuff off for 20 years, but instead of making a 10-year, is it like a 15-year spread, right? We pushed a couple out.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Am I making sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, you are, but you have to ask the question, do you want to pay $5,000 for that boiler this year, or do you want to pay $7,000 to do that boiler next year?
Yeah.
So it's only going up. I mean, everybody here is in agreement that nothing is coming down. The three things that make up a job when it's out for bid are labor, materials, and equipment. They're all going up. Nothing is coming down. Material is not coming down. So the question is it a $5,000 job or is it a $7,000? Is it a $1 million job or is it a $2 million job? It's just going to keep going up, and that's where you got to say, and it's going to just keep going up. I mean, so it's like.
But how do you make it sustainable, though, JR?
but
How do you
sales
think
tax
about, like?
By asking for a 1% raise.
Yeah, but it's not sustainable, because what you're saying is, that's fine, it'll get us through this, but
This will get us to-
then there'll be another 1% raise and another 1% raise, and it's like indefinite. There's no real way to find Stacy's. There's no real way to say, look, we've got a system in place that we can afford to live this way forever.
I think we are saying that. If you remember, we're still doing catch-up. We're replacing things in roads that were built, 50s, 70s, things like that. So when you look at this list and you look at the levels of service and the pictures below, it isn't that you can't wait. You can wait. But what level of service are you going to provide these customers, and how long do they have to wait? Or if they have stormwater coming in their house, that you're going to tell one that they have to wait 4 more years to do it. What we've presented to you here and in the past was a CIP that's achieving catch-up to get us up to the point where we are doing more maintenance. We are still in catch-up mode currently. We are telling you, Brent, Lisa, and I have evaluated all these different projects and the money we have coming in, and if we're going to keep up with the catch-up that we've been doing, we're saying we need revenues to achieve these projects. If we don't, we will have to go back. The CIP was always built as a flexible document. We always said that if revenues were good, we would do more and pull things up. If revenues dried up, we would do less. We have come to that crossroads where we have expended excess reserves. We've done a good job over the last 10 years, spending $100 million. I can tell you that we did not bring in $100 million in the last 10 years. We have spent those excess reserves. And if we're going to complete, Brent, if you go back up one slide, there you go. So what we're hearing from, the engineering and the status of the pavement is that these projects are the ones we really need to try to get done in the next 7 years to get caught up to the point where we're doing more maintenance. Reconstruction is 10 times more expensive than resurfacing. Once we get to the point where we're doing resurfacing, if we have the sales tax that we think is going to be able to afford us to do that, it should provide an income level to the point where we should be able to sustain. I can't promise that. I'm not an engineer, but we've looked at. I love these pictures where you see the colors and things that are changing, and it takes time. It takes money, and it takes a prioritization. I know, Lisa, when we met with all of you individually, we ask you, hey, is this document what we want to do? If we agree on these projects need to be done over the next 7 years, and I know there was some comments the last time we talked about this, is can we move one from 4 years ago to 2 years from now? Possibly, we can move those things around. But it's a factor of if this is what we're going to achieve, we have to have revenues to do them. I don't think any of us are sitting here saying you can't wait. You can. We have to be honest about that. But it's how long do you want to wait, and what levels of service are we providing to our residents in the meantime? And yes, I would concur that unfortunately prices just aren't going down today.
Let me comment. So one thing when we have a tendency to look at, especially sales tax, is that 100% of the sales tax is being generated only by people who live within the city of Lockport. So, Walmart wouldn't be the fantastic, largest and most successful Walmart in the Chicagoland area, but for the east side of Joliet, Okay, I don't know what the number is, but I would say 40 to 50% of the sales tax it doesn't come from, generated by the city, that we collect, is not generated just by residents of the city of Lockport, okay? And so this is how we get other people from other communities to help pay for our infrastructure. So 1%, I don't know how much people spend in town per, let's just say somebody spends $20,000 a year buying sales taxable stuff in Lockport. So 1% is $200, extra per that one person. And some people aren't going to be spending that much. Some people eat out 7 days a week, and some people, cook at home. I think the best thing for us to do is, when we go ahead and look at how other communities can have to pay for things, you may remember in Romeo and Shorewood and Crest Hill and Joliet, they've got $1.2 billion project they got to pay for beginning in 2032. They're not paying for it now. They'll be paying for it then. And so every single one of those communities are going to have to come up with some revenue stream, and it just can't be sales tax, and it's especially when it comes to, because how is Joliet's in the middle of a $453 million water main project just to get them ready for the $1.2 billion they got to pay.
Yeah, and that's fine. I mean, that's their
So
problem.
I think 1% is going to put us right smack in the middle of everybody else. I like 2C. I think seniors who don't use a lot of water are going to be paying less than they're currently paying now.
Yeah, I understand the water rate structure, and I think that, quite frankly, I like being around people that are smarter than me, and what you guys presented let me have that today. I like hearing people who are very intelligent. You guys did a magnificent job. Staff and Max are all coming up with this. So that I understand. It's that 1% sales tax thing. And I guess in some respects, I'm thinking philosophically in the sense that, well, some things do come down. Lumber's come down. We're like, oh, lumber's going to be, it's going to cost $100 for a 2x4 forever. And it didn't. It came down. So some things have come down. But God knows what's going on in the world right now, right, bro? You may be right. It may never, we never have steady prices again. But some things have come down. So, and I've heard that with the certain economies collapsing, that suddenly cement and steel are seeming to come back down. So there is some hope that some prices will level out a little bit. But I guess my second thing then on the larger scale is and you touched on it, Ben, is we've all recognized that we had to do a lot of catch up. When we started this job, as Darren and I together 10 years ago or whatever, we first presented, said, hey, listen, let's show us a CIP. We went to staff about, like, what does it look like with our existing revenues? How much work can we do over time? And that was good because we had a chunk of change sitting around because previous councils never pulled the trigger on anything. It was weird, but so be it. And we were able to get a lot done. And it was good because we have a lot of catastrophic problems in the old downtown, which, as you mentioned, Brent, you've done a magnificent job with staff and everyone getting these projects on 100 blocks. My question then is, once we get past that catch-up of all the old infrastructure that had been ignored for decades, we have been doing maintenance on other things. Does one day all the Victoria crossings have a similar catastrophic failure? It's like, look, we can do maintenance, but eventually, 25 years from now, all that freaking water main is going to have to get ripped out all at once. And is that like, is there anything for us to think about now to help plan for that? Or is it like, that's their freaking problem. Like, that mayor and that council can deal with that problem 25 years from now. Are there catastrophic failures in the future for every subdivision that's currently out there?
Well, what I will tell you is that what this is proposing would significantly improve our opportunities for the future. It would put us in a much better spot. Am I going to tell you that it's enough money? No, it's getting us much closer. But what I think from an engineer standpoint, just, thinking about this thing logically, I hear exactly what you're saying, I hear what Ben, I hear what everybody is saying, and I want to get to that point too. I would love nothing more. We've, like I said, 150 blocks. We've got these blocks left, and if you drive around town, what these blocks indicate, these blocks are the areas that we don't have curb, we don't have storm sewer. That is a big piece that we're missing in these areas. Once we get storm sewer, I'll tell you, once we get storm sewer, the costs of these improvements do go down quite significantly. You have curb, you have storm sewer. Concrete lasts a long time. And again, how long? You ask somebody, they're going to tell you 50 years, somebody else is going to tell you 100 years. Concrete, storm sewer in place significantly lowers our costs on everything. If you need to replace water main in a subdivision with curb and storm sewer, you just go in there, you replace your main is typically going to be on one side, you're going to now put it on the other side or in the middle of the road, and you're going to come through and you're going to be able to resurface that road. You're not going to reconstruct, you're not going to have to widen, you're not going to have to put storm sewer, you're not going to have to put curb. So to answer your question very directly, the reason these projects cost what they cost is because we were going from an 18-foot wide road or a 16-foot wide road with no storm sewer to a fully improved, 2023 road.
Brent, how much longer does the road last if you're getting the water off of it with a storm sewer?
And again, these are, to scientifically
way
tell
longer,
you, scientifically tell you, it's night and day.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. That's why we do crack filling. I know nobody likes the way it looks. I don't like the way it looks. But the longevity that we gain, the quicker we can seal up that road, the longer it's gonna last. My job is to do exactly what you're talking, Mayor, is to make sure that we can get to that maintenance period. Sisson, Johnson's Addition, that area, that is a major area that needs to be addressed. 12th Street, 11th Street need to be addressed. Those are the areas that once we finally get through those areas, we have curb and gutter in places across the city. Now, what I want to point to very quickly is if you look at Port Ridge, the dollars we have on Port Ridge versus the 12th Street project, we're actually doing more water main in Port Ridge. All of this is rear yard. We're doing more water main in Port Ridge, but the overall cost is less. And we're talking about a job in 3 years, $8.5 million to $6.9 million. So to answer your question, Mayor, that is some of that savings that we would see. You're absolutely correct. As soon as, let's pick a subdivision. Karen Springs, water main goes out, all that main's going to have to be replaced. It's about 20 years old, so 60 years, somebody's going to be getting that phone call saying we have to replace it all. But we have curb, we have storm sewer, and we have a road system that is in place that doesn't need to be doubled. Right now, we're paying, if we have $1 million, half is water sewer and half is roadway recon.
Right.
That's the killer right now that's kind of drawing us back. The other thing, Mayor, that just really quickly, if we want to talk about pushing these out, the other thing that we would have to consider is doing some intermittent resurfacing, because we have some roads that just aren't going to make it, 3 years, 4 years, to 8 years. So that would be correct.
Yeah, and we've already done that. We did that with Sisson. We did that with 11th Street. We did that. We put the lipstick on the pig just to get us to this point. And I think.
Well, I feel better about something I haven't considered, and that is modern subdivisions that were built in the 90s and 2000s and up have things that all the old part of town doesn't have. And I guess I never considered that. So that does make me feel better, because I don't want to feel like, oh my gosh, yes, we're going to raise it 1%, and then the next council's going to raise it 1%, and the next council's going to raise it 1%, and it's like, God, is there any way to find sustainability in living life in this world, right? And so,
Because everything's going to become more expensive,
Right.
and you'll get 1% of that higher cost of everything that you're going to buy next year. And then it's going to be more expensive the year after that, the year after that. So like, it's a percentage of it, not like, okay, if you spend $100, we get $1 forever. You know what I mean? Like, everything else is going to get more expensive too. So I'd hope it covers it.
Yeah, because you have
It's not
the,
like we're charging per transaction or something
Right.
like that. You know what I mean?
Brent, I like the project layout to where as you're attacking the older portions first, and a comment that you had made when we talked about this before was, you can't jump ahead one subdivision because you're putting more pressure into some older pipes. So you systematically looked at it and said, you know what, in order to get over there, let's put the better stuff here, better stuff there, and then replace that over there. So I think layout-wise, you did a great job in terms of attacking that. The comment you had also made about streets don't last as long if they don't have curbs, because the edges of the road end up getting broken, and then you end up with craters at the end of it, and that's a bigger problem as well.
Freestyle on the water that's sitting on it too.
Right. So I think what you've laid out here, although everybody in town is going to feel the pain, I think when you drive through town, like Darren over by you, the area over there with new streets and curbs and stuff like that, it's like, oh my God, it's a new subdivision, and you're not really nailing it. And whereas, well, look at those people over there, they're getting all the attention. We have a very old town with old infrastructure. The sooner that we can get that old stuff replaced, then, like to your point about getting into maintenance mode where, now you're just repairing things that are broke, not ripping out and replacing. So you did a great job, in my opinion, to lay this out, and Lisa as well, looking at the financial part of it. And to Darren's point, that 1% increase in sales tax, it's not going to be burdened on just the Lockport people. Now, will that drive people out of Lockport? I don't think so, because my wife shops in Orland, where they have higher taxes on stuff too. So you're going to go where it's convenient for you. So
Wait, your wife goes to Orland to shop?
yeah, we have an ordinance against
certain
that.
places.
No. You can't go east of I-355.
There are certain things that she purchases that are only available in certain stores, and I let her deal with that.
The other
But
thing we didn't mention is, so if you're getting this additional revenue to help us complete the catch-up over the next 7 to 10 years, we will take that, if we do get to the point where we're caught up, we need a little bit more to keep up with resurfacing. We're only budgeting $3.5 million a year right now, and I think Brent would tell you we probably need to be doing $5 million. But again, we can't afford to keep doing all this reconstruction and do a full resurfacing project. So as we catch up, I think you'll see us spend a little less of that sales tax on reconstruction and a little bit more on resurfacing, which just keeps us ahead of it. It keeps us at maintenance only. Yeah. Right.
I just wanted to piggyback on what the mayor said earlier, kind of about what he was saying, fixing some stuff up in his house. I know I'm new to the council, and I just, trying to wrap my head around everything, and I appreciate Mayor Stripe bringing me in, kind of get me up to speed on the water treatment stuff, and Ben get me up to speed on everything. I'm still not 100% there, but pretty close. But I know the mayor touched on it earlier. I know people are trying to stretch a dollar as far as they can get it. I mean, they doubled the gas tax. We got grocery tax. I know when we looked at our bills, the District 205 tax went up, D91, D92, 33C went up. I mean, we're battling inflation. I mean, it just feels like it's death by 1,000 cuts. I understand where everyone's kind of coming from at this point, but I'm not really comfortable with, kind of going with the flow and, adding another 1%, just saying it just needs to be done.
When was the last time, Lisa, we raised taxes?
So that home rule was in before I got here, so
That was
2012.
Home rule was probably around 2011, 2010.
It's been over 10 years.
So in 2018, that's when we added the gas tax.
What about the sales tax?
That was back,
Home, non-home.
Home rule happened after 2013.
Yeah, it was even before we were home rule.
I started here in 2014.
It was called the non-home rule at that time. It was about 2010, 2011.
Oh, we had passed a non-home rule
Non-home
ordinance,
rule.
but then we surpassed 26,000 people and
Then it became the home rule.
and that allowed us to do the gasoline tax. So that's what we implemented in 2018.
So the council approved a additional sales tax in about 2010 or 2011.
It was the 1%.
It was
and
1%.
Specifically for
Right.
infrastructure.
And
Yeah.
what we're proposing is another 1% to complete the catch-up and the necessary resurfacing. And again, the road work is needed to kind of recover the water work. We're still behind in the water sewer work. So I'm not sure, again, what would you delay and when? I mean, that would have to be determined, but, and that's what we're here. I mean, this has been a great debate, and I want to thank you all for your time and input, and we're looking for direction. You know, we could put this on as an action item in November, and it sounds like we had consensus for 2C, which makes a lot of sense, and we can do the 1% as an action item and see where it comes in, and if we don't get it, we'll have to adjust the CIP for that reason.
And look, and let me emphasize this last piece, that I 100% agree with Pat. He's like, oh man, you guys have worked through these problems over the last 10 years that I've been here, I think, outstanding. People talk about, the city's looking good. I always say it's because we have a good staff. I mean, it's been extremely professional in how you guys approach these projects, and you're coming before us saying, hey, listen, the refrigerator's out, the tub is out, the boiler's out, and you're coming to me like an engineer and saying, these are all the problems, right? And it is our job to decide, okay, we're gonna, you know what, kids, you don't get ice this year, okay? It's okay, we can live without ice, we still have a refrigerator. So that's a decision we have to make. And that's fine, but I've always been so pleased about the good staff that we have and the professional, way you guys have put this. I remember before, we used to have the guy, we had a borrowed street, remember what they borrowed that old street, that Dr. Seuss machine that eats up the road. We had a public works guys redoing streets because we thought, we'll save some money. The street lasted like 6 months.
Cost a little more.
Yeah, so you guys have done magnificent. So I just want to emphasize that. So regardless of our decision-making, what you've presented is outstanding, and thank you. So now it's on us.
I'd also like to say thanks for not just tacking it on to property taxes, because I think approaching it from the sales tax perspective and having the people that come into town to shop sharing that burden
And
we've
discussed with each of you, 2 by 2 with the budget information before we present it to the public in November and to approve that all in December. And I think we're all very proud that we can say that we're driving our portion of the real estate tax down by, I think it was 3%. And, by segmenting many of our different types of operations and capital into different things and different pieces, I think also helps us achieve that, right? If we hadn't done that additional gas tax a few years ago, we wouldn't have the MFT funds to finish Illinois 7 next year, right? I mean, that's a big chunk of money that we wouldn't have had. We would have had ahead of another 1% sales tax a couple of years ago. So we have a pretty good balance of revenues and expenses. Very proud of the department heads and the way they own their own budgets. I mean, none of our departments have had reckless spending and any issues. They treat everyone like it's their own money, which is the most I can ask of anyone. And when I see the work that has to be done, it's like, okay, how are we going to achieve this?
So then, can we ask then that you bring back to us 2C with the 1% as an action item? Is that how we work this?
They would be separate votes, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
we can work on ordinance language and present those as action items, and I think it would be 2 ordinances, it's not resolutions.
Yeah, it would be ordinance for the actual water sewer rate, amending our current city code, and then for the 1% would be a separate ordinance.
Okay. So it could be two ordinances if that's the wish.
Yeah, let's put them down for two different action items, and then, because they are separate. And then, let's reach out to Homer and figure out what they're doing, so we can understand that aspect, and if there's any cost sharing with lift stations and such, let's see if we can't add that, to the mix. All right, my friends, well done. Thank you, everyone. Any, all good? You're looking for a motion to adjourn? Renee, seconded by Joanne, all in favor? All right.